Everyone, if we can make a start, it's now 9:30, so can I welcome you to the Sedgemoor District Council Development Committee. I'm Councillor Filmer, I'm Chairman of the committee. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get on to the meeting itself. There's no planned fire drill this morning, so if alarms go off, then they are the real thing. You'll need to make your exits through the fire exits at the rear of the room. There are toilet facilities located again at the back of the room through the central doors. And if you need to have a drink, there is water and jugs and glasses on the right-hand side as I look at the back of the room as well. Could I just ask all members of committee and members of the public who are present, and even those online with us, if you've got mobile phones with you, could you please either make sure they're turned off or please turn to silent so they don't interfere either with the PA system or interrupt the meeting. Just to let you know who's in front of you this morning, to my right are officers from our Legal and Democratic Services departments. To my left are officers from our Development Management Department and also from the Highways Department. And on the wings of the table to right and left are the councillors who will be debating and ultimately deciding the applications before us. The meeting today is actually being organised as a hybrid meeting, which means that the members of... Can I just check if any councillors have got their computer speakers turned on? There seems to be some feedback.
Just a minute.
Okay, that's okay. So as I say, this is a hybrid meeting, so that the members of the committee are present in the room at the Canal Side, North Petherton. We're also available online via Teams, so the members of the public and other councillors can take part with us virtually. But only councillors who are present in the room today are able to vote on the applications that come before us. Again, just a quick reminder that this meeting is being recorded, so it is available online after the meeting has concluded. The format of the meeting is as per the agenda published, and a copy of the officer presentations can be found on the council's web pages. Each application will be taken in turn. The officers will outline the background detail of the application, followed by the speakers who will be asked to either come forward to the speakers table or do online, and I'll explain that in a bit more detail in a moment. We'll then have the opportunity for members to debate the application. A proposal will be put and hopefully seconded, and then there'll be a vote. And then once that vote has taken place, we'll announce what the vote was and the result. So that brings me to the conclusion of my opening comments. If we move to apologies for absence, Mr. Taylor, are there any today, please?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Kathy Pearce and Councillor Bill Rebbins.
So that's Councillors Kathy Pearce and Bill Rebbins. I'm only repeating it because we don't have a microphone there at the moment. I might ask actually, Councillor Grimes, if either Legal or Democratic need to speak, could you just pass them a mic, and that'd be great. Thank you. That moves on to the next item, which is the minutes. We've got the minutes of our meeting, which was held on the 21st of July, to check. One amendment that I'm just going to mention from the chair. On page 18, the penultimate paragraph refers to the number of affordable homes that were needed, and that 2 were consented on another site. That number should actually be 8, so it's not 2. We'll get that amended in the minutes. Are there any other amendments that any other members have picked up in the papers? Yes, Councillor Betty. That's good.
Yes, Chairman. I was present at the meeting, but I'm not down, and also I'm a member of the Parrot Drainage Board, but I'm not marked down as a member of the Parrot Drainage Board either on those minutes.
Okay. We'll get that updated as well. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't find which page it's on now, but I had it. It said here that at the last meeting, I left one meeting because I was predetermined, which is not actually true. It's because I knew the applicant. I wasn't actually predetermined, but I left the room because I knew the applicant. But I can't find which page it's on. Sorry.
Okay. I think we'll need to obviously just we'll check that out, make sure we get that updated. So it was you left because of a prejudicial interest rather than a predetermination, which was at that stage. Councillor Scott.
Yes, again, I'm not on the. I am on the drainage board, but I wasn't mentioned. Axbrew.
Okay, and Councillor Hendry.
I've just found it, page 30.
Thank you very much. Taylor, you happy you got all those? Okay. Right. Are there any other amendments? If not, can I have a proposal that with those amendments included, that these are a true and accurate record of that meeting? That's proposed Councillor Kingham, seconded, I think it was Councillor Grimes. All those in favour that they are signed as such, please show. That's clearly carried. So thank you. Brings us to item 3, which is urgent business. I've not been advised of any urgent business that isn't covered on our actual agenda. So item 4 is public speaking time. For members of the public, for those of you who've registered to speak today, some of you are present in the room, so what we will do is when we get to the application that you've registered on, as I mentioned before, the officers will give the outline and detail of the application. I'll then ask you to come forward to the speakers table and you have 3 minutes to address the committee. You'll see that we have a clock on the front. It counts the time down, so it tells you how much time you've got left to go. Obviously, if you can bring your comments to a close within that 3 minutes, that would be helpful. We also have some speakers who will be joining us online. What we'll follow there is, again, the officers will give the background. I'll then ask them to turn on their microphone and camera so that we can make sure we can hear and see them. Again, they'll have 3 minutes. The only difference is they can't see the clock. So when there's a minute of that time left to go, I will interrupt and just let them know they've got 1 minute left to go. And then we'll again call time up when it gets to 3 minutes. Item 5 is declarations of interests. Are there any declarations, please? We'll start with Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I first say, could you give apologies to Councillor Facey?
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, page 101, it's in my county ward, but I've taken no part in any discussions on it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And just to confirm, that's a non-predetermination declaration, and I'll explain that in a moment. Councillor Bolt.
The same item 89. It's in my division and ward. They're taking no part in any conversations.
Okay. Councillor Betty.
Page 45, it's in my district ward, but I've taken no part in any consultation.
And Councillor Perry.
Yes, thank you. And the same for me as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hendry.
Okay, I took advice from Don Lehman at the far end, and I was told to declare that I'm Somerset County Council and STC, but take no part in any conversation with any person.
Okay, I think there will be a number of councillors who are county councillors. Just for ease, can all those of you who are county councillors as well as district councillors just put your hand up so that we can make a note? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hayward.
As a member of Bridgewater Town Council, page 82 is in Bridgewater, and I've taken no part in any discussions about this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Glassford.
Exactly the same.
Thank you. And for myself, I need to declare on page 101, again, it's within my county division, but taken no part in the discussions. Where members of the public, it's important you know if there's a background or detail that members have in an application. Where you heard the declarations today, they've been non-predetermination, which basically means that we have a standing order within this committee, which basically says that members could either get involved at the town and parish council level, or they can get involved at the district level. The reason for doing that is if you are involved in the process early on and are seen to be part of that decision making at the town or parish, it may be perceived that you've already made up your mind, you've predetermined the application before you come to this committee. And so that's where you've heard members declare that they've taken no part in those discussions. It enables them to be part of this committee. If they had got involved at the town and parish level, then when we come to debate that application, they would have to leave the room and not take any part in it. So that's why members have made those declarations today. Right, that brings us to the planning applications themselves. The first application that we have before us today is on page 45. We're in Middlezoy, and this was subject to a site visit, and then we'll have the report from the officers, and I'll then go around to the members of the site visit team for them each to give a feedback of the site visit, and then we'll get into the debate of the application. So, Mrs. De Vries, would you like to introduce this one for us, please?
Thank you very much. So the application seeks consent for 26 dwellings, 10 of which are proposed to be affordable and meet an identified need as set out in Middlezoy Housing Needs Assessment which was published in 2021. Application was submitted to Planning Committee last month and has been subject to members' site visits. So I'll just briefly run through the slides again for members. So this application site shows a star where the application site is. There's also an additional land parcel further to the south, which is where the drainage is proposed to go. The application site lies outside of the settlement boundary for Middlesoy, but does adjoin it. And this is a slide, again, slightly zoomed in aerial view of the site, just showing the location of the site relative to the development in the surrounding area. And this slide shows the location of the settlement boundary, which is the green outline on this slide. And again, the star indicates the location of the application site with back lane at the top hand corner of the site, which is where the access is proposed to go. So the site is shown with two main land parcels. The northern section is where the proposed 26 dwellings are shown to be located, and the area to the south is proposed for drainage with an attenuation pond towards the bottom. And the layout of the site shows the access off back lane, which is set back into the application site to ensure that you've got visibility to the north and south. There's a footpath at the entrance of the site, which would allow an access into and through the site, connecting to the right of way to the top of the site and providing an access point out of the bottom, which connects back onto the highway. So again, this is just a detailed view of the access arrangement. So members will see the giveaway marking lines are set back into the site so that you can get visibility display up and down back lane. And the other highway alterations that members saw on site looks to alter the junction of back lane and main road. So members would have seen the highway markings from the site visit. And there is a need to move the current junction lines to ensure visibility in both directions. The alterations would result in a single width area and priority markings at the junction to allow the flow of traffic. So these alterations would be subject to a traffic regulation order. So this slide just shows an overlay of the access alterations at this junction, with the entrance to the application site shown with an arrow on the right of this slide. So just so you can see where the two interventions are relative to each other. And then in respect of drainage and surface water runoff, the site is due to channel the surface water runoff to the south of the site, and then it's due to be stored in an attenuation pond, which is to the south of the main site. Landscape details have also been provided for the site, which confirms the hedged boundary would be maintained to the highway, where it would be taken out to allow for the access. It is due to be replanted again, so it would be re-establishing at the front. And the hedge line again will follow the highway down to an area of public open space at the bottom corner of the site, and there's a footpath that will connect back into the highway at this point. So in terms of character and appearance, the next few slides just show some of the floor plans and elevations for the properties. There's a mix of property types within the development, including terraces, semi-detached, mix of materials, including brick and render, and a mix of gable detailing with chimneys, lean-to and pitch roof designs for porches. So there's a number of detached plots and some differing design details between the units, and also semi-detached plots. And there are also some single-storey garages shown, which again show a mix of roof lines, so gable frontages or gables running side to side. So next few slides are just a few site photos taken from within the site, and a view from looking within towards the access point and looking to the north. And this is the roof of the barn conversions, and a view from near the access looking south, and a view from the approximate location of the access and the barn conversions on the opposite side of the highway, and looking in the opposite direction. I'm running through these quite fast because members have obviously had the benefit of site visit. And this shows the existing access between Back Lane and Nethermoor Road. And just a few more sites of the surrounding highway. So this highway network located to the west of the application site, with the pub car park on the right in this image. And again, this just follows the road down as members would have seen it. So this is a view as you progress towards the existing cross junction that members would have seen on the site visit, and looking back up towards the pub car park and the proposed access. And a view from the cross junction at the moment looking to the right. And this just shows the limited visibility that's currently available when you're using that access to the left. And this is a view from Main Road looking back towards the junction. And a view from further back in back lane showing the existing pinch point on the highway. And again, this is a further view just showing the general area where the highway alterations are proposed. The giveaway marking lies forward of the vehicular access that's shown in this photo. And this shows some of the existing on-street parking that's currently used on site and members would have seen as part of the visit. And a view of the junction looking east towards the George Inn. And back to the site, view down Nethermoor Road with the hedge line that will be reinstated where needed. And the relationship of the properties further down the road. And this is the bottom end of the site in terms of where the layout of the 26 dwellings is proposed to go. So in terms of key issues, there is a housing needs assessment for Middlesoy, which does identify the need for 28 affordable units. Policy T3A does support a mix of market and affordable houses. The 10 dwellings that are proposed as part of this development would meet part of that identified housing need. So in terms of principle, subject to being secured by section 106, there's no objection to the principle. The site's well related to the settlement boundary. The main consideration, as expressed by members in the last meeting and as a result of the site visit, is the impact on highways. There's two main interventions proposed as part of the development, one of which is some off-site mitigation and works at the entrance of the site, both of which have been subject to the previous slides and seen on site. In terms of visual impact, officers are satisfied the design of the houses were considered to be acceptable and the landscaping is proposed to be secured via condition 22. The amended condition 22 now refers to the most up-to-date layout drawing, which does show the hedgerow going all the way up. I think a previous iteration had shown it missing in parts, but it's been amended to show the hedgerow all the way up. So the condition is just proposed to be amended accordingly. In terms of residential amenity, there's adequate play space and open space for the enjoyment of the proposed development. In terms of floor space and layout, there's a good level of amenity for future occupiers, and the nearest property on the opposite side of Nethermoor Lane is in excess of 25 metres, and therefore it's not considered to give rise to any adverse impact on amenity or overlooking. And in respect of drainage, all the technical details have been reviewed and agreed by the lead local flood authority. The application was also supported with a number of ecological reports that have been reviewed and confirmed by ecologists, and a number of conditions are being proposed to secure improvements. So given that these issues can be covered by condition in section 106, the application is recommended by officers for conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned, we've got a number of speakers on this application, so I'll come to those next, and then we'll have the site visit reports from members. So if we start with Nobby Turner, please, if you'd like to come forward.
Widestone number 1.
Again, to remind you, Nobby, it's 3 minutes on the clock. Start when you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. The villagers in general to whom I speak for, they are objecting to this application. Their reasons for objections are pretty simple. We requested Sedgemoor do a housing needs survey for the village of Middlesoy. They did this for us and they came up with 26 social houses affordable to rent. What we landed up with was 26 houses. Only 16 of them are for sale, 2 of them are for part ownership, and 8 of them are for rent. How do we tell the rest of the people that are applying for these they can't have one? Because somebody else wants to make money by selling big properties. It's not right. Apart from that, there has been questions about the parish council at one time agreed to this site. They may have, but once we realise we need 26 houses, it became obvious to everybody that this site cannot accommodate 26 dwellings. Therefore, the village have sought to find other locations, to which we have found one, which we are not going to talk about at this meeting. Why did we reject this site? From the picture you can see in front of you on your computers, you've got the site there. You can see grey fields or brownish fields behind. Their access is via that site, I might tell you. The farmhouse that owns them is the one just to the north of that red star in the middle. They can't be refused access, even though there is a footpath going along the same hedgerow. Those fields are accessible only from there. If you come down from that site, you will see just below it the allotments. There are about 26 of them. People drive there, they push wheelbarrows there, and all sorts of things there. It's a community livelihood or part of the village. And further down from that is the village hall, which also has a lot of functions, and traffic goes from that road, Back Lane, Nethermoor Road, to that village hall and those allotments. So when the highway said there's hardly any transport on it, they must have come out on, I don't know what day, Christmas Day last year, perhaps. Now, the highways also say that the road's narrow, but people can walk on the grass verge. Well, had they walked out there instead of looking at this map, they would have found out that grass verge is a 2-foot deep ditch, which is overgrown, and you wouldn't know it until you fell in it. This site is the wrong place. The houses are the wrong ones, and thank you very much.
Thank you. We've next got John Griezmann, who I believe you're speaking on behalf of the Parish Council. Thank you. Again, you'll see the time on the clock. Please start when you're ready.
Okay. Christmas is obviously a time for miracles. One new property on Back Lane would be detrimental to free flow of traffic and highway safety, a fact upheld on appeal. But 26 new properties won't. Then there's the blind junctions at Main Road, where Back Lane and Old Chapel Road join. Those members attending the site visit will have seen that it is impossible to make left turns onto Main Road without the nose of the vehicle crossing the white line in the middle of the road in order to get visibility. However, we are being told that this is not a blind junction. In fact, painting a few lines on the road will make this junction safe. You can tell that the highways expert does not live in the village. I suppose we'll just have to wait for a fatality. Then we come to discussion. It is claimed that there has been robust discussion between the village, parish council and the developers with regard to this development. In reality, there's been absolutely no discussion. If anyone suggests the contrary, will they please let me know the date and time of such meeting and provide the minutes to me. I highlighted at the site visit the dangers to pedestrians that will be caused by extra traffic on Back Lane, not to mention the additional footfall created by 26 new houses. These problems, those members attending will also have seen for themselves the problems with parking. The George Inn has a small car park. It has to accommodate the landlord's vehicle, his staff, and potentially 3 sets of guests in the guest bedrooms. All of this before anyone comes for a meal or drink. Inevitably, there is overflow. We're told that 8 social houses and 2-part ownership houses is a useful start in meeting the village needs. But how do we know that they will get any social housing built? Look at Nether Stowey. The developer of Cricketer's Farm applied to remove social housing from the development on cost grounds and was successful in April 2022. We also have examples in the village of developers deviating from plans and getting away with it. Look at the Nethermoor Road development where it joins Main Road. Another blind junction has been created, which was not on the plans, but nothing has been done about it. Accidents have already happened there. Those members who attended the site will have seen the strength of feeling which exists in the village against this development. On behalf of all those in the village, I request that you please reject this application. Don't let another country village be destroyed for the sake of profit. It would be a very sad epitaph for Sedgemoor.
Much. Our third speaker is James McKechnie, who's joining us, I believe, on Teams. If you could turn on your camera and microphone just so we can check that we can hear you okay.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Again, just to remind you, you've got the 3 minutes and I will interrupt you when you've got 1 minute of that time left to go. So please start when you're ready.
That's very kind. Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. The proposed development complies with local plan policy T3A, which permits developments of this nature with significant affordable housing provision. It has previously been identified as a preferred site by the parish and district councils. The application addresses relevant local plan policies, as well as the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework, including need, community engagement, sustainable access, highway safety, and operational matters. The application is supported by an approved transport statement, travel plan, highway improvement designs, and an independent road safety audit. 4 separate technical bodies have reviewed the highways proposals: Somerset County Council, the local highway authority; Hydrock, professional advisors to the developer; Bartlett Consulting, independent road safety consultants, run by the past chair of the Society of Road Safety Auditors; and David A. Graham Associates, road safety consultants to the parish council, plus, of course, the local planning authority. None of these organisations has raised any operational or safety issue that would prevent the granting of planning consent. Traffic surveys have confirmed the number and speed of vehicles using surrounding roads. The site access has been designed in liaison with Somerset County Council highways, and visibility displays are based on speed survey data. The proposed improvement to the main road, Back Lane, Old Chapel Road junction would increase visibility. Again, this design has been developed in liaison with Somerset County Council highways, which recognises that it would benefit all users of the junction and mitigate the traffic from the development. The developer would fund a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in the area around Main Road, Back Lane junction, secured via planning condition.
You have 1 minute to go.
Thank you. Highway land is available for all of the proposed junction improvement works and those along Back Lane. A construction traffic management plan would be secured via planning condition in the usual way. So in summary, the application site is consistent with local and national policy. It is supported by technical documents and designs which are agreed by the approving authorities, following review by 4 separate technical bodies. The access proposals and off-site works have been designed based on traffic surveys in liaison with Somerset County Council. The surrounding highway network has operated without recorded incidents for many years. The County Council agrees that the proposed off-site works would improve safety for all users and mitigate the minor increase in traffic associated with the proposed development. Alongside these works, the developer would fund a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit and would provide a construction traffic management plan. On this basis, members are respectfully asked to grant planning consent. Thank you very much.
And well timed. Thank you. Before I come to members for the site visit reports, I've just been reminded that we didn't declare interest in terms of membership of drainage boards. So could, again, I just ask members who are members of a drainage board, could you indicate, and again, that can be recorded, and just to confirm that is also confirming you've taken no part in discussions at the drainage board on any of the planning matters today. Got those? Thank you. Right, so if we come to, as I mentioned, this was subject to a site visit. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Just a point of clarification, really. One of the speakers mentioned about the housing need assessment and identified that it was 26 homes for social rent. Just to clarify that point, there was absolutely identified a need for 26 affordable houses, but 19 of those were social rent, and there were, I think it's 7 shared ownership ones, just to clarify that point.
Okay. All right, thank you. As I mentioned, we had the site visit, so I'm going to come around to members for their site visit reports. I'll start with Councillor Grimes, who'll need to get the mic back. But while that heads to Councillor Grimes, if I could just offer an apology also to the residents, because when we went out to the site visit, we were met by a large proportion of the village. There was a communication issue. We actually had arranged to meet at Bridgewater House at 9:30, but the message that went to residents and the parish council was that we were going to be on site at 9:30. So can I thank you for being there in what was a pretty cold morning and bearing with us and your good humour when we got there, because you could have been a lot more stroppy than you were, in fact. So thank you very much for the way you behaved that day, and sorry for the fact that we kept you waiting. It was a communication error between ourselves and the parish, so sorry about that. Councillor Grimes, if you'd like to start with your site visit report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe this shows the benefit of a site visit in this case. I viewed the site from various positions, then walked the roads to assess the safety aspects and concerns of residents, while getting the views of the highway officers on my concerns. I left with a lot to consider. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt, you were present.
Yes, I was. Again, it's essential sometimes to get out and have a look at these sites. It was very interesting to hear the concerns of the villagers, and also having walked the area, listening to the highways officers. I think it's important that they're there on a lot of these occasions. It was very, very beneficial for the site visit.
Thank you. Councillor Betty.
Thank you, Chairman. I echo Councillor Bolt and Grimes's statement. It was very useful coming out there for the councillors that don't know the area. It definitely shows the layout of the road that have the public and residents of Middlejoy do have concerns with.
Councillor Perry.
Yes, thank you. I attended the meeting as well. And yeah, it's nice to see the people coming out to, the councillors coming out to see the site, to get a true vision of what the villagers will have to deal with this development.
Councillor Kingham.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's very useful site meeting. When you go to sort of one of these Somerset villages with very narrow roads, residents parking on the side of the road, you get the feeling of what the actual environment is in the village itself. The access to the site, when you look at it, it is quite restricting, and the highways have obviously gone a long way to try and provide safety aspects for people using the site and people of the village. At the moment, I'm reserving my judgment.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Tony Grimes for asking for the site visit. It was the most worthwhile I've ever been on in 4 years. I do have a lot of information which I want to talk about, but not at this moment in time. I'll wait until things move on a bit. But yes, absolutely worthwhile, and I do thank him for that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Scott.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with everyone that's spoken so far in that it was very useful going to the site because it does show how narrow some of these roads are and how difficult it will be to access them. But some highways have actually come up with a proposal, but the main road, I believe, is the main road, and it would be very busy at peak times. Thank you.
Councillor Glassford.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a very interesting site visit. Even I still got serious doubts about the safety of that junction, even though there's been 4 different experts saying it is safe. I shall listen to the debate, but I am saying I'm very concerned about what I saw anyway.
Thank you. I think I'm the last member of the site visit team that were present. As other members have said, we met actually at the back of the George in the car park, and that's where we heard from members of the public and the applicant's representative. We then viewed the site. We looked at the entrance to the actual site itself, and then went and had a long look at the junction with the main road through the village at the front of the George. At that point, we obviously looked at it in context with the highways officers as well, looking at the proposals as to where they would be going. I think, as the members have said, it was it was a very useful visit to go out and have a look at it on the ground, because there's only so much you can get from plans, and seeing it there and it was very beneficial. Again, I'll reserve my comments until later in terms of the merits of the application, but it certainly was a useful visit. And again, if I could thank the residents who attended, it was useful to see the strength of feeling in the village as well, and the way that you received ourselves and all the speakers that day was a credit to the village. So thank you very much. Members, are there any comments that you would like to make in terms of the detail of the application? So we'll start with Councillor Hendry.
Okay, thank you, Chairman and members of the public. First off, the complaints obviously all seem to be about the roads, the traffic movements and the entry to the site and exit. Straight off, highways are actually okay with all this. They've given their own advice. They've been there, done their calculations. They're absolutely fine. Villages are what they are. They always have narrow roads, funny little bends. That's what they are. They were put there for horse and carts originally, but things have moved on and now they take cars. But nonetheless, villages are what they are and you have to live with it. We said about highways, that's fine. Not all these homes have two cars. Somebody mentioned something about everyone has two cars. That would make, in essence, 52 vehicles, which is not correct at all. Some houses have one car, some have two. So if we go on the fact of 1.5 cars per household, then we arrive at roughly the figure 40. Not everybody works. Some people are retired, some just don't have a job, and that's that. So on the balance of probabilities, you could take away 25%, and that brings you back to about 30 vehicles. Then, if you narrow that down again, not everybody goes to work at the same time. Now, we've passed this conversation so many times. Some people go to work at 7 a.m., 7:30, 8, and so on. So you're not going to have a congestion of about 20 or 30 cars at any one junction within a half-hour period. Life just doesn't work that way. So, albeit narrow lanes, yes, but the congestion of traffic, very, very questionable indeed. The incoming people into the village would be a broad mix with children, I have to assume, because of the houses. Now, that kind of thing breathes life into a village. It brings new families in, it brings new children. They use the local pub, the local shops. So it's not all bad news on that front at all. I actually think it's a good idea to bring new children and families into a village of that size for the reasons I've just outlined. The most important thing that I noticed there while on the site visit, because I thought the site visit was absolutely first class, by the way, the most important thing that I noticed is we were there for 1 hour, walking up and down back lane in the car park, having a good look at everything. The splayed entrance to the site is fine. As I said, highways are on board with it. They haven't picked up any problems that they just haven't. It's fine. Anyway, back lane itself, we were there for 1 hour. There was not one single vehicle, not one, that went up and down back lane for all the time we were there. So the conversations, the feedback that we were getting was there was a lot of congestion, a lot of traffic, there'd be a bottleneck. Well, I have to reiterate, there was not one single movement of any vehicle at all in back lane for the hour we were there. And that was mid-morning, which you would think, it's not a peak time, but I think there would be movement of people wanting to go in and out, go to the town, go to Bridgewater, Taunton, whatever the case is. But I reiterate and say again, there was not one single vehicle within that hour we were there, nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members' comments? We'll start with Councillor Betty then.
Thank you, Chairman. I would say, in reply to Councillor Hendry, that there's probably no traffic going up through there was because the majority of the village were actually stood at the site visit with us. I had a few questions.
Hold on to Councillor Betty. I would just ask again, as it is on the site, I know there will be comments that you'll make, which some members will make, which you're supportive of. Others, it is important that we get on with the debate. So if I could ask, I think we'll know which you might be favourable towards. But Councillor Betty, if you carry on, because again, just go with what you were wanting to say.
I have a few questions. With the new road layout, how will this be policed? It's all very well putting in these road layouts, but I can't remember the last time I've seen a police officer in Middlezoy or in any parts of my ward. So that's how that's going to be policed. in regards to the D3 with sustainability and energy and development, do we have the energy that is going to be used to heat these homes and whether it's going to be renewable? In relation to the LAP, who will maintain this? The parish council already have a play area in the village, just short distance away from this development at the playing field and village hall site. So will the parish council be expected to maintain this and fund this, increasing the precept on the local members to do this? The last question is, in regards to the site not actually meeting the 40% affordable home target, it's only 38%, and instead they're going to produce a financial contribution of £28,750. But who actually gets this money, and how is this figure worked out, and is it acceptable to a tier 3 settlement?
Okay. Mrs. DeVries. I think the mic's not. Can we move it any nearer to you? Have we got a hand on? Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies. In terms of policing, I'm going to pass over to County Highways to respond to that one. In respect of D3, building regulations have recently enhanced their building standards in terms of properties and what scale they need to be built to, in terms of construction and that type of thing. That is picked up through building regulations, and given that we haven't granted consent yet, they will be needed to comply with the most up-to-date standards. So that's kind of wrapped up in the new sort of stricter building regulations requirements that are coming through the system. In respect of LAP, the play area, the local area of play, that's usually controlled through Section 106. There's usually a toggle option within that either they give it over to the council for a commuted sum, or they have a management and maintenance company that take it on, and then they are obligated to manage it and maintain it at their own expense as the management company. That's the standard approach for residential development. And in respect to the 40%, it's because the way they worked out how many units, it does come up as 38 point something, so it isn't quite 40. The shortfall is calculated by the affordable housing team, so they cost out how much a house would cost and what the percentage of that house would cost to make up to the 40%. The figure was agreed with the affordable housing manager. That again would be secured through the Section 106 in the event of approval. It would sit with the council, so there would be a trigger for it to be paid to the council, and then it would be ring fenced for expenditure on affordable housing within Middlesoy, because it's meeting the affordable housing need for Middlesoy specifically. So it would be ring fenced geographically to the village. But in terms of policing, don't know who.
Jody Grabham, Somerset County Highways. In terms of the policing, we've asked for a TRO, a traffic regulation order, for some parking restrictions. Obviously, that would then give the option then for enforcement from our county parking officers. So that would be the main way. Also, there's hatching, which is proposed, solid hatching, which you shouldn't be parking on either. So that kind of self-enforces.
So basically what we're saying is we're going to have a officer come out from the county, then come all the way out to Middlesoy just to police that, or just to check if there's any cars parked on that hatched area when there's no other sort of area in the area. So we're wasting an officer's time to come all that way out to hopefully catch someone, or hopefully not catch someone for the safety. Surely that's just a waste of an officer's time, one would thought.
Well, yeah, a lot of the time they actually act on reports. So, if someone's reporting that as an issue, then they'll come out in force.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, then Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you. So what are you, highways, are you saying that the locals who've got no other means of parking, say on the main road. They've got no access to parking other than parking on the main road, will probably not be able to park there anymore.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It won't be the whole road with parking restrictions, just the bit which would allow the scheme to work.
But there's quite a lot of housing there that actually require parking on that particular section that you're proposing to close down. Is that right?
If I've just put up the slide because I think the area we're talking about really is the junction, isn't it? Yeah. So in terms of the parking restrictions, and feel free to kick me under the table if I'm getting this wrong, but in terms of the parking restrictions, you would be restricted, so you can't park in the hatched area, so the painted out hatched area. And again, so it's either side of the junction, sort of in these locations generally, and where you've got the waiting area on this side. From the site visit, members would have seen there's on-street parking currently along here. I think it would be a safety consideration as part of the TRO in terms of whether you would need to extend double yellows just to allow for vehicles to sort of get past the waiting point or not, and how far that would have to go down. But the restriction, as shown on this plan, would be the hatched area, the hatched sort of painted line build out area for definite. Double yellows aren't indicated, but I would suggest you'd probably double yellow just this side of the waiting area to allow a car to get past to let this vehicle out.
I can't see that working, unfortunately. And also I have major problems and issues with the junction from Main Road. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you very much, Chair. I feel as if I'm some sort of oddball person here. Thank you very much. I thank you very much for the suggestion and the agreement to go on a site visit. Unfortunately, my computer was down and I wasn't aware there was a site visit. So I was someone who was gaily walking along thinking that we were only going to meet today. And then I discovered after a visit to Sedgemoor and my computer was fixed that there was a site visit and I'd missed it. So I decided on the Thursday following the site visit to wander down in the afternoon to Middlezoy to have a wee look round. And so I was very much an innocent abroad, wandering around villages. And I come from a village. I was born and brought up in a village, so I know very much about village life. And one of the features that I turned up into the car park area of the George and drove up and then back to the left, I think that's Nethermoor, and right up to the junction at the top where you completely double back on a blind bend. And I would ask anybody to, if they went up there, they'd get the fright of their life at night, or they would be, there is without any doubt a 300 and something immediate bend that you're going around. You don't see anything until you get round the bend. And that is a feature of back lane as well. When I went up back lane, I think that's where the village hall is. Clearly, at that time of the day, there was nobody around. I mean, apart from contractors and what have you. But the feature of that village, I discovered, is that there's an awful lot of niche development, right? Tucked away little developments coming out of lanes, coming onto the main lane. It's actually, I mean, it's quite, in some respects, if you're going to increase the traffic substantially, you are creating, in my opinion, a dangerous situation where children, mothers, people with prams, all that sort of situation, family life will be on the lane itself. Not necessarily during the day, because at the morning they all get up and go to work if they can, or they go to school if they can. And so the actual day itself would be the wrong time to do a survey, because the survey, there's nobody there apart from women, God bless them, going to the shop or whatever, people going down to the pub for the odd lunch or a wee pint or a half pint or whatever it is they do. And even off the George area, there are several houses off the lane as you go up and down the lane. So in my impression that I got was that this is, frankly, a village that is typical of Middle England, small villages with lots of niche development, lots of cart tracks which have become roads, and some of them are still cart tracks. They're still so narrow. I mean, my Hyundai was perfectly happy, but once I got to the blind bends, it was difficult. When I went down to the George entrance, it was quite a tight entrance. It's not exactly a bellmouth entrance. It's just, and you've got the corner going around. So you have a feature in that village of lots and lots and lots of tight corners. So I came to the conclusion when I looked at the field and I thought 26 houses, And in some respects, I began to laugh because, you know, this to me is in some respects sort of a joke. 26 houses plunked. If they'd said to me it was overdevelopment, in other words, in a more technical sense, I believed it was overdevelopment. The interesting thing about the site was 2 fields away is the main highway. I mean, that would seem to me to where the access should be for these houses, not for something. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to incur any kind of applause. It's just that, you know, these are just, I promise you, absolute observations of someone who's quite innocent. I wasn't even briefed to go there. I mean, I didn't know I didn't know you were going to have some sort of lay-by somewhere at some point. But lay-bys and hatching are not going to make the thing work. And I suggest that you all look very, very carefully at the practical application on this village. It's not about whether they need, I do appreciate it's a gift to the village of affordable housing. It is a gift, and really they need it, but not there. I'd have to say, I personally would recommend that if they dropped it down to 12, they might get away with it. But 26 houses of cars coming out onto an incredibly narrow lane with you cannot, this county highways gentlemen, I thank you for coming, but I have to say, anybody who in the right mind would even suggest there's no blind alleyways or no blind turnings has got, it must have been, you know, I don't know, they'll not be sleeping very well. It is without doubt a quite a dangerous situation we face ourselves. And also, when you consider that if I go back down back lane, I'll almost finish, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to take up so much time, but if I go down back lane again and I look at that very excellent, it looks like a new village hall they've got. That will become busy village at night time when there's things on in the hall. People are going to walk to that place. I mean, and here you have traffic coming along that area. It's not, I mean, it's not what we see. It's what we don't see. When we go there and we're walking up and down thinking, well, driving along that back lane is dangerous enough because there's so many niche houses, bits and bobs left and right. And you have to say, well, crikey, I better watch what I'm doing here. I better stick to 10 miles an hour, not 20 miles an hour. And then you get past the hall. Once you get past the hall, it's not so bad. You're moving up to the corner. But if there's an event on at that hall, and let's face it, villages are all about events, about social cohesion in halls or wherever, that's going to be a busy area for walking. And I don't think they've thought of that. So I'm very sorry, but in this case, much as I can see that they do need social housing, all of these villages need social housing, I would have to say I'm not really very sure about this officer's recommendation. Thank you, and I apologise for my amateurish talk to you today.
No, thank you. Fine, Councillor Murphy, no problem. I don't think there's anything to answer there as such, but okay.
So they did undertake a traffic survey as part of the work for their transport assessment, and that was a week-long survey on Nevermore Road, which had peak movements, so 8 till 9, two-way movements of 20 vehicles in total, and then 5 till 6, that was 18 vehicles moving. So in total over the whole week, daily, sorry, trips, that's 188 in total. So it's 3 in the peak hour, 3 every, 1 every 3 minutes, sorry.
Thank you. If I can comment, I mean, I must admit, having been out on the site visit, as we all said, was useful, and I must admit, my starting point with application like this is I am supportive of affordable housing in rural areas, and I've had it in my own villages in my own patch. The concern that I have with this one at the moment does come down to the volume and the access, in terms of we've just heard the sort of flow of traffic that's there at the moment. An additional 26 units will generate quite a proportionate increase. I think highways have worked hard with the applicant, and the applicant has tried to address an issue that is there. The problem is, does it go far enough in terms of dealing with that. There's reference in the report that we've got here of the traffic regulation order in terms of making sure that visibility is improved by not having vehicles parked there, with allowing for the extra white lines and signage. And without that TRO, I don't see how there stands any chance of standing up. Having looked at it on site when we visited, the visibility from that junction is truly dreadful in both, coming from both directions onto Main Road. The white lines give you a bit more leeway, but it is still not a great junction. And without the TRO confirmed as definite, I think it's the traffic regulation order. I would struggle to see how that works. We've got issues raised obviously by the report that was done by the David Grabham Associates, which raises some of those issues. And I think, as I say, my concern as it stands currently is I'm not sure that junction has as much work that's gone into it, whether it actually can solve a problem that is already there, because the village wasn't designed for modern day traffic. It's a struggle as it is already, and to add to that, I think is going to be an issue. So those are my concerns at the moment. I will again wait to hear the rest of the debate before making a decision, but I'm not sure how we address those. And bearing in mind the traffic regulation order is not something we can control through planning. Potentially, we could end up with a development without the traffic regulation order, and that, I think, for me, would be a real problem. Can I ask if there's any comment wants to come from Highways?
Just to say that the TRO process would be best endeavours. The fire, police would be consultees. So yeah, there's no guarantee.
Okay. Councillor Bolton, then Councillor Grimes.
Sorry. Thank you. Just going back to the report, I've got a few questions. There's a reference here to the Somerset County Council Highways, no objection subject to safeguarding conditions. I understand that is the road junction layouts, is that correct? You did the wording here is safeguarding.
What page it's on, just so we can try and if that's
51.
It would be subject. It would need a legal agreement to deliver the white line. The priority narrowing, bringing out the giveaway lines. That would require a legal agreement.
So that's what you're referring to in the report, when you're saying subject to safeguarding conditions. Is that junction layout?
I think that's agents.
I think just in terms of page 68 of the officer report, there is a conclusion that does say that in considering the TRO, the highway officers accept that should the TRO fail, they did not consider that would make the development unacceptable. But that's the highway view. There are conditions appended to the back of the report in terms of development should be undertaken in accordance with the approved plans. So the on-site alterations of the access into the junction, that's all part of the application site, that's all highway land, so that's all achievable. The question mark, I think, is probably the cross works junction. And if you want to clarify which elements would be within highway land and with the highway scope, and which bits would be subject to the TRO, because it could be partial delivery, but if you want to.
Okay. Right, so the TRO so the traffic regulation order, that would be the potential 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, that would require a TRO, and any parking restrictions. The actual delivery of the on carriageway markings, etc., that's already within the public highway. For them to carry out that work, they'd need to have a legal agreement with us to cover that. And on back lane itself as well, according to our records, all the works there would be within the adopted public highway. And I'll just add as well, obviously the new access to the development, that would also require a legal agreement with us, and then any adopted road with inside that.
And these, okay, thank you. The next one, if you could, sorry, if we could go back to the junction with back lane and the other road where we have the giveaway. Thank you. The giveaway is only set up to cover that main road. It isn't to give priority to anybody coming out of back lane. Is that correct?
it would work existing. So if someone's giving way to, you know, the car coming from a direction of Western's Oil Intake, you know, coming down Main Road, they'd give way to that car, but they would then, once that's clear, they'd have priority. The other two would give way just as they do now.
So anybody just turning out, putting their nose out, the car that's controlled by the give way line isn't required to give way.
They would give way to the cars coming on Main Road, the traffic
Right.
on Main Road.
Sorry, yeah, I understand what you're saying. This seems to be being sold to us is that gives protection to people coming out of back lane from the new estate. I can't think of the name of the road now. The through road.
Main Road.
Main Road. That's it. The give way line affords them some form of protection. That's how it seemed to be sold to us on the day.
It's not, that doesn't give them the added protection, if you want to call it that, would be from increased visibility. So at the moment, the visibility is really poor. It just increases that because you can see to the visibility to the right. If you're coming out of back lane, is you can see adequately there. It just brings that giveaway line forward so that people can then look to your left and have increased visibility. It's not ever going to be, you know, complete perfect because you just can't get that there because of the nature of the properties and the location. So it just gives that increased visibility. Initially, I did have a objection to it in terms of there wasn't anything done for Old Chapel Road to bring that giveaway forward, because if you had the priority coming for vehicles travelling south, they would be pushed further that way, so it caused Old Chapel Road even more problems. So they revised their design to include that side as well. Because again, it's equally as poor. There's no visibility at present, hardly any.
Thank you. The other thing now in back lane, there's not, as far as I understand, there's not going to be any footpaths in there, and we are talking about this as a direct route from the development through towards the school. Is that correct?
There's no footways currently, no, and there isn't any proposed. There is. I have been trying to speak to the developer or their agents to see whether they can include a little bit of footway provision within the adopted highway, but I haven't had a chance to speak to them at the moment since the site visit.
Thank you. Now, again, sorry to carry on, Chairman. There's no restriction on the size of vehicles that can be parked in the car park. I think that's a planning issue, which would obscure if somebody parks a van there or a large vehicle where you can see over the wall now if you're walking down the road, as the highway code says, facing oncoming traffic, you're going to be obscured on the corner as you go round towards Main Road.
Yeah, so I think just going back to the original point first in terms of footpaths. So on this plan, you can see there is a footpath edge to the application site that goes into the application site. That does connect through the layout of the application site to the right of way to the north of the site, and it does also give safe route through the site, popping back out at the end, but it is restricted to the application site. It doesn't connect outside of that down back lane. Unfortunately, one of the constraints for this site is the pub car park. You know, it's not within the control of the applicant. And similarly, what vehicles park where within the car park, again, isn't in control of the applicant. This plan that's before members at the moment, the sort of orangey yellow line does show the full extent of highway land. So, you know, there is ability to influence what can be delivered on highway land, but based on the tracking plans that's shown on that plan, I think there's fairly limited scope to get a footpath in down back lane in terms of what is currently available that we could have any influence over, because the car park does not fall within part of the application site, and we don't unfortunately have control over that.
Thank you. What I'm looking at is the application is centred around the road junction layouts leading to the application for road safety issues, and I'm seeing quite a lot of road safety issues apparent right the way through here, because we're not saying that every person is going to be totally ambulatory, kiddie wise, to get down through there. it is quite narrow as you go through that point. And there isn't any protection there at all. If somebody, say, is in a wheelchair, that's the only time I'm digressing off what I actually saw. How long will the TRO take? I think, and is the TRO going to be in before, and the road junction layout put in before, so we can do an assessment on whether this is going to be a successful junction?
So I think in terms of conditions, condition 5 does say no dwelling hereby permitted shall be occupied until the developers applied for the TRO to introduce the parking restrictions and a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on Main Road, Back Lane and Nethermoor Road in the vicinity of the development. And the TRO is advertised, and if the TRO is successful, the 20-mile-an-hour limit and parking restrictions shall be implemented at the developer's expense to the satisfaction of the local planning authority. So if acceptable, the TRO should be implemented prior to first occupation. But the risk is it's an independent process outside of planning. So we don't necessarily have control over the completion of the TRO. They would be required to apply, but that's the extent that we can go to in terms of planning condition.
And it wouldn't be enforceable to stop them from occupying the houses if the application failed. But I think, yes, sorry. And will the TRO for parking restrictions apply in Back Lane?
If I can just clarify that the TROs as a whole are dealt with under the Section 278 agreement, which would be linked to the works on Main Road and at Back Lane for the junction into the site. So you'd have a single legal agreement with two elements to it. The TRO process, there are TRO clauses in the Section 278 agreement alongside the planning condition. As Dawn said, it's a best endeavours approach with TROs at the best of times. They are subject to public consultation. The villagers will get a chance to make their representations, and also the police, emergency services and any public transport type operators would be consulted on any TROs. So there would be a wide consultation. And that normally takes about 3 months. If there is objections to the TRO, they can end up at a committee at County Hall before members. Not sure how that's going to work with unitary, but in the past that's how it goes. That the objections are put before the members and then a decision is made. So that's sort of really the ultimate end of where the TRO goes. The actual works themselves, as Jodie has said, would be subject to a legal agreement. That legal agreement has in itself got a series of, if you like, hoops to jump through. There's the initial, what's happened at the moment, we've got a road safety audits, stage 1 road safety audits have taken place. The works, assuming planning consent is granted, the works go in. There would be a subsequent road safety audits picking up on issues as they're completed, and then as they go on to maintenance, and then when they're finally adopted. So there is a process to go through, an iterative process to the design. And normally what happens is the drawings that we get at planning are generally in accordance type drawings, and they then lead on to a more detailed design phase before the works are actually completed on or started on site. Now, obviously, we're looking to get those works done before any occupations, which is a sensible way to do that. You do have the construction traffic to worry about, but that can be dealt with through a construction management plan. But yeah, the TRO process is not guaranteed. That's really what I'm trying to say. Parking on Back Lane, obviously, we would try to introduce some pedestrian facilities if we could within the existing highway. Because there are some grass areas, and that chap on the corner, number 38, I think there's some highway there perhaps. But again, those issues might be picked up through the detailed design process. But again, it's reliant on planning consent being granted. But anything highway can be used to be improved. That's really where bottom line is.
Thank you. I think my main concern is there seems to be a bit of a shoehorn effect to try to get this development in on a road junction and layout of Back Lane and Main Road, which I don't think it is leading to road safety for pedestrian and also road traffic. From my own experience getting out of that junction, it is very tight. We know where the give way markings were going to be I couldn't see that far. The car had a long bonnet on, but you know, I'm not the only one with that sort of issue. Thank you, Chairman.
I've got councillors Grimes and councillor Betty who've indicated as well to speak. So councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the debate and have to agree villages are what they are, but that does not make this application right in this place. And I have to agree with residents in this case. I understand the need for an application in this area, but I believe this is in the wrong place as I'm not convinced the roads are safe for the amount of traffic involved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Betty.
Thank you, Chairman. We keep mentioning about the cars using this junction, but with these 26 new homes, there's going to be an increase in people walking, especially children to the school. I mean, unless we're expecting the cars to drive there a few 200 metres down to the school, which would just be mad. So with more children on the road, this junction is going to become even more dangerous, even with these improved roadworks. I note from 3.4 of the parish council's independent survey of the potential for collisions as a result of the introduction of the pros propriety narrowing system. I mean, they're even saying that it's gonna, where was it to? Could be caused a hazard or approaching drivers of riders attempting to brake. So even their report is saying it is still a danger. I also note that we keep, there was mention of T3A, the tier 3 settlements housing. One of the points on that was appropriate to the scale, design and existing character of the settlement. This will put a 8.5% increase on the size of the village. It won't fulfil the need of the identified homes in Middlezoy. Would have to have another nearly another 2 sites of this size, so nearly increasing the size of Middlezoy by a third, just to get the affordable homes that Middlezoy desperately needs in there. And in regards to that, from on S1 presumption in favour of sustainable development, from table 4.2 on that on page 20 of our local plan, it does state in a tier 3 the percentage of housing growth should be 7%, but obviously this is 8.5%. But if we're counting that we're going to need another 2 sites, it'd be a 30%, like as I said. So I will not be supporting this application for on, but I will carry on listening to other members. But at the moment, I am not supporting this application.
Thank you. Mrs. De Vries, did you want to comment or? Or Mr. Howlett.
I was just going to sort of perhaps sum up where I think the room is following Councillor Betty's comments. I think principal issues, I mean, the site does accord with policy T3A. I mean, the 7% figure you're doing is the overall proportion of housing that goes to tier 3 compared to everything across the whole of Sedgemoor. So it's not an area where you necessarily need to go in terms of this. In terms of whether it's overdevelopment, out of scale, out of keeping. Now, obviously, some of the highway issues you're raising can play into that, but actually for a tier 3 settlement, the size of Middlezoy, we've seen larger schemes in other tier 3 settlements through this planning committee, and it hasn't been a principal issue in terms of the scale. So, you know, I think in terms of principle, how it accords with policy T3A, I don't think that's an area where it would necessarily be a safe recommendation from members if that's the way to go. The highway issues I'm interested in, I think there is always a balance in these things. We are trying to deliver housing for local people and some affordable housing as part of that. And there is always a balance in terms of how that fits within existing villages. Some village networks will be much more difficult than other village networks. And actually, the whole point of the last local plan was to distribute growth into smaller settlements where these issues become a bit more difficult to deal with, because obviously, you know, focusing development in the towns, it's easier to plug into existing infrastructure. So absolutely accept some of the concerns that members are saying. I suppose we've drilled down to the detail in this application in terms of highway safety. The consideration of the highways officers in terms of the negotiations with the applicants has sought to try to mitigate some of those concerns in terms of the improvements that have been suggested. So it is a balance. So everything is a balance. It's not saying that this will be 100% highway safety, sufficient, and it will always rely on the users and the way people use the highway as well, of course. So that is always a specific issue that you need to bear in mind. What I'm interested in, I think, is the debate about the traffic regulation order, because it's quite clear that that does give some comfort to the Highway Authority. It gives some comfort to the Planning Authority, and I think it probably gives some more comfort for the members if that TRO was in place, that some of the highway safety issues could be more mitigated. Now, as you've heard, there's no guarantee in terms of the TRO. It can't be guaranteed. I'm just curious, there is this bit in the report that Mrs. de Vries read out earlier about the fact that it says, in considering the TRO, and the highway officer accepts that should the TRO fail, it would not make the development unacceptable. I think we probably need to explore that a little bit more in terms of the weighting from the highway officer's recommendations about that TRO, because actually if members are looking to go against the officer recommendation, the TRO is probably an area where there is still some discretion. So I don't know if it's okay, Chairman, to hand over to the highways just to talk about the weighting of the TRO.
Yeah, so I did discuss this with our safety audit person. He was under the impression that, especially the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, that is not essential because the speeds have been surveyed. They're not actually much more than that there now. It just would help to and bring them down a little bit further. It will do that. The actual traffic calming will also bring down the priority narrowing. That will bring down the traffic speeds as well. In terms of parking, obviously there's already parking opposite the George Inn, which kind of creates a priority narrow in itself, now. So he didn't feel that would be much different. So he didn't think that was essential, as well.
Very much. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've had a good debate on this, and I don't like disagreeing with highways, but I believe there's too many unknowns on this, and in this case, I'd like to move a recommendation to refuse planning permission, and I have reasons to follow up. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Grimes, can I just get you to, if you could outline the reasons behind it, and then we'll
Thank you, Chairman.
come to other members.
Yes, I believe the TRO sits outside of the planning. I think that is one. Impact and intensification of existing networks, and also uncertainty of the interventions. That would be my reasons for refusal on this. Thank you, Chairman.
I'll come back to you in a minute, Dawn. I've got councillors Perry, Betty, and then Bolt. Perry, Councillor Perry.
Yes, thank you. Is Highways saying that we need to have another report for a TRO? Is that what they're actually suggesting, that we won't have a result? We need to know.
So in effect, just to try and if I can give my outline of what I think we are, and then if you tell me when I'm wrong. So in effect, the traffic regulation order is a separate legal process from planning. Our condition within the report here at the moment says that the applicants have to apply for that traffic regulation order in order to make those things happen. But what we can't do is guarantee what the result of that traffic regulation order will be, because that will be decided by the Highways Authority through the County Council. And so there would be a whole new process for that traffic regulation order to go through. What we do with the report at the moment is we guarantee that the applicant has got to start that process. What we can't do is commit him to what is going to be the outcome of that process, because that's not in the applicant's domain to control, and it's also not in the planning authority's control. So that's why it's worded in the way that it is. But I'll ask if there's anything you wanted to add.
Sorry, if I could just clarify again, that the agreement, you're right in a way that the TRO process sits outside of planning. It's highways legislation as opposed to planning legislation. As I said, the 278 agreements, assuming consent was granted, for instance, the 278 would have clauses in it that dealt with the TROs alongside the planning conditions. So you'd have it almost like a belt and braces approach. So it would be covered by our agreement. The agreement would also talk about road safety audits and any works that we think are necessary as part of those coming out of the 278 process. So, like I said, it's an iterative process. The drawing that you've got in front of me is the initial design. It would lead on to a full detailed design, and it may well be that it needs to be altered over time to reflect the technical aspects and the road safety reports that would be published in the future. So. Yeah, it's a complicated process, but the TRO itself, I think, as Jodie has said, it's ideally it would go in. Our people are telling us that it can work without it, but again, obviously, we've got to go through the 278 route and get to the end of that, and then end up with a safe arrangement or as safe as possible. And obviously, we're dealing with a medieval type village where we're short of knocking down properties. We can't really do much to improve things, and visibility is restricted. The traffic speeds aren't that high, but what we want to try and do is keep them as low as possible and make it as safe as possible. For that point about pedestrian access to the school, I believe it's also part of the children are kept at that school and some others are elsewhere. Is that correct? So there is a sort of the flows of people taking their children to school maybe would be by different roads. But yeah, the whole situation. Well, I'm just saying that the situation is we can only go on with the application in front of us. The Highway Authority has to be careful. We're not here to design it for the developer, so therefore we are just reacting to the designs in front of us. We if they came back to us with some separate ideas or some new ideas, we could again look at it. But that's entirely up to them, and they would have to approach us outside of planning.
Okay, can I come back to that? Come back. I think it's a lot of hassle just to put 26 houses there that are absolutely in the wrong place. Trying to make this fit for such a small area. And I'm going to second the refusal.
Thank you. And again, just to as we have to deal with the application in front of us, it's the same thing for our officers and the highways officers. They are dealing with what they have as the application. So, Mr. Howlett, did you want to comment?
Just very briefly. Very briefly, just to say that obviously, if we're looking to refuse on highway grounds, it is tricky when it gets to an appeal because Highway Authority are the highway experts in these things. So we do need evidence to go against them, and that would be explored by an inspector. I say that, you've obviously all said, raised issues today that will help guide officers in terms of how we deal with that if we're in that situation. I suppose it's just being clear that you still have an opportunity to clarify issues with the highway officer at the moment, rather than close the debate and go to it. It's just a point about traffic generation that was raised. I don't think defending traffic generation on a development of this scale, I think Mr. Grabham said 1 every 3 minutes, I think, wasn't it, earlier? And so, whilst I know that members are concerned about that, it goes back to my point is this is about a balance in terms of we have policies in place, principal policies in place that allow for development of this scale in these villages, and there will be a degree of traffic generation associated with that. So that's just a point I would raise. And then the lack of impacts of the improvements. Again, members just need to be very clear that they understand the rationale of the improvements and the ability that they will fix things. And again, Councillor Bolt raised concerns about the give way. There was a priority, there would be a priority there. So you're only looking at one vehicle going past the access rather than two. That does make a difference. So it's just making sure that members understand the impacts of those improvements or lack of impact of those improvements in those concerns. And the TRO, I think we all know about the uncertainty of the TRO and how significant that is in terms of members being able to determine now whether the scheme would be safe with or without it.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Betty and then Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to second Councillor Grimes, but my fellow ward councillor beat me to it. I just want to cover some points that the highways officer stated about their school situation. Now, there's a minibus that goes between both Middlesoy and Overy School with children. So these children will still be walking down this road to get to the school, and they use a minibus to go across. So there will still be that amount. Also, it's not just the children that be walking down there. This junction will be used to either go to the chapel, the church, or the village community shop to get there. So this junction will be used by walkers. It will be a busy junction for these walkers to go there to the shop to get their newspapers. I mean, it's only just down from the school. The community shop is opposite, and same with the chapel. So this junction will not work. It's just going to cause more issues. There's going to be more injuries to people that are walking or even cycling along this road. So I just definitely will not be supporting this application.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt.
Going on from Mr. Hewlett's comments with regards to the highways, I think the statistics still hold 12 to 65. Under 12, over 65 is the highest rate of pedestrian accidents. Back lane just doesn't lend itself to kids using that road. You know, it is worked out. We're saying about road traffic users. Pedestrians are road traffic users, and they're the ones that have got the least amount of traffic experience. You know, I know how wide an agriculture vehicle can be.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chair. It just, sitting listening to some of the arguments here, it has occurred to me that there's a great deal of neighbourliness in terms of development in small villages. And it's in small amounts, and it's in a great deal of care towards other people as we go through. To then suddenly launch 26 houses in one block, it becomes a slightly more of a power block, and it becomes more of a destination block in terms of vans, in terms of white van. We are seeing a large increase in vans in all of our areas, and in small villages with lanes for access and no verges, we will see many more vans coming, especially to new houses. People ordering stuff, getting stuff delivered because it's difficult and more difficult to get out. So I would just say that, in my opinion, it strengthens my thoughts that village life would be disturbed by this, and we need to see a measured growth, if you like, a staged growth in villages. We often have talked about villages not being allowed to have self-build because it might disturb the ratio of housing here. Here we have a different story where we have a largish block compared to the rest of the village, where the whole village has small, narrow lanes. And if you then start increasing that exponentially, you will upset the balance of the village. And so I would suggest that in my first suggestion was overdevelopment. If that had been half the amount of houses, we wouldn't be talking about this today. That's all I need to say.
Thank you. Councillor Grimes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I do agree that it is a balance, and it is very balanced, but I do stand by my reasons for refusal on this case. Thank you, Chairman.
So again, just to clarify, it's the balance in terms of the works or the proposed highway works as to whether that will address fully the issues at the junction in particular. I think in terms of the reason why there's the challenge from members is twofold. I think we've got obviously the site visits that members have been out to look at it on the ground and make sure that how they could see it operating in the way, and the explanations we've had. We've also got the concerns that were raised by the professional report that was provided via the parish council in terms of highways, the Grabham Associates report, and the uncertainty. I think it was Councillor Grant raised and officers have confirmed the uncertainty in terms of the TRO, because both the legal process through planning and through highways cannot guarantee what the outcome of that TRO process will be. and whether it will actually deliver the works that are suggested would help mitigate, because we've heard our county highways colleagues actually believe that mitigation isn't essential. So the likelihood of it being delivered, I think, is not good. But so that's sort of the couple of areas that we're highlighting as reasons, and is that something that is reasonable as far as our planning officers may be concerned, even though it may not be something that you totally agree with?
I think in terms of a defensible recommendation that, you know, we would need to go back and defend in the event of an appeal. The TRO does seem to be the area of uncertainty in terms of delivery of the mitigation that's currently before members. Recommendations as a result of the interventions that are currently proposed that require TROs sort of suggest it would be acceptable with the TROs. So if there is uncertainty about its delivery, I would suggest if members are sort of looking to go that way, it would be sort of insufficient certainty of delivery of the TRO interventions, and therefore concerns about the intensification of the existing highway network and potentially additional impact on pedestrians as a result of sort of insufficient mitigations available. I would suggest that might be the easiest defensible route if members were looking to go that way.
Okay. Councillor Grimes, are you happy that that meets the issues that you were wanting to address?
Yes, Chairman, that does meet the issues, and I think Mrs. De Vries explained that a lot better than I did.
And Councillor Perry, as the seconder, you're happy with that wording as well?
Thank
you. Okay. If there's no further comments or questions from members, then we have the recommendation that has been moved and seconded for refusing the application based on the issue, the reasons we just outlined. All those in favour of that refusal, please show. And those against, please show. And any abstentions? So hold on, can we just check how many we've got there, because I make that 11, 10. There are 12 members around the table. Okay, can we just for clarity and make sure that we've got this right? So those that are voting for the refusal, please show clearly. Okay, and abstentions. Thank you. So that is clearly carried. So that's 11 in favour, 1 abstention. So the recommendation to refuse has been carried. So thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that we do a short comfort break. We'll have 10 minutes. We'll restart at 15:15, and I'll give time for people to leave the room should they wish to. Again, if members can turn to page 89 in your papers or online, where we have our next speaker present. Have you got the note that Councillor Perry's had to leave? Okay, so if we move to page 89, I think, is it Mrs. De Vries, are you presenting this one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. So the application is before members, as Cannington Parish Council have objected to the application on grounds that the barns are outside of the settlement boundary and that the approval of the barns will create a new hamlet. The application is for conversion of 2 separate barns, previously known as barns 4 and 5, but referenced within the report as barns 1 and 2, just to create some confusion. And there's partial demolition of a barn. It's conversion to 1 3-bed dwelling. So this slide just shows the application site. Obviously, Cannington is shown to the north. There is also quite a lot of planning history on the application, which is set out within the officer report in terms of other barn conversions within the complex that have previously been granted planning permission. So this is just a closer aerial shot of the site showing the proximity of the site to Cannington. And again, a closer view of the main buildings on site, which includes the main farmhouse, an attached outbuilding. These are the ones with the red brown clay tile roofs down this end. And this barn is known as Barn 6, which is attached to the listed farmhouse. Barns 4 and 5 are sort of these ones. And they are they're the subject of the application, but also known as Barns 1 and 2. And the barn to the top end of this site has also been granted a prior approval for subdivision to 4 dwellings. So again, just showing the location. So this is the farmhouse to the bottom. This is Barn 6, previously referred to. So for the purpose of this debate, this is Barn 1 and Barn 2. And this is the location of the prior approval building. So the application site is accessed via the existing access track, which joins Blackmore Lane. In terms of traffic generation, the application would be for the reuse of 2 existing outbuildings, which formerly served an active farm site. So looking to confirm consent for 1 3-bed dwelling, and given the former use of the site, there's no objection in respect of highway safety or traffic generation. In respect to material finish, Barn 1, the buildings themselves are agricultural, constructed in a mix of styles dependent on the size and age. Majority of the construction is still framed, although there are elements of block and brick with clay tiles. And the building nearest the dwelling is constructed of stone and has some stonework within it. This shows the existing footprints of Barn 1 and 2 and the existing divisions within the building and the relationship between the 2 outbuildings. Under the previous application, the development was refused due to the scale of alteration, insufficient information in respect of biodiversity, and concerns regarding design and impact on amenity, because previously it was sought consent to convert into 2 separate dwellings. This application now is for a single dwelling, so it's conversion of the 2 buildings into 1 instead of 2 separate dwellings. This plan just shows elevations on Barn 2 and confirms the section that is proposed to be removed as part of this application. So the bit that's hatched in blue is proposed to be demolished as part of this. So in terms of layout, the proposal is to convert 2 barns into 1 3-bed dwelling. At ground floor, there's a carport, boot room, gym, playroom, home office and shower within the footprint of Barn 2, and the main kitchen, diner, bathroom, 2 bedrooms and a glazed link connecting Barn 1 and 2. And there's also an additional bedroom within the roof space of Barn 1. So it's sort of almost a mezzanine type floor. And this just shows a roof plan. Barn 2 has got the grey roof being single storey, and there's some limited accommodation in the roof space of building 1. The roof slopes generally remain as is, with the addition of a couple of roof lights and a glazed link that connects the 2 buildings. So in respect to proposed elevations, the existing stone is to be conserved and displayed, with the remaining elevations to be rendered or wood clad, which is considered to be appropriate given the wider character of the area. Next couple of slides just show a mix of stone, block and red tile roof of building 1. Previously, officers had raised concern regarding the extent of building that could be converted, but this was presented at committee and previously members were satisfied that there was sufficient traditional materials that were integral to part of the building that warranted further consideration for conversion. So the main openings, as shown in the photos, are proposed to be retained. So the structure of the building, as is in these photos, remains as per the last time presented to members. So this is a view of the other end of the building where there's a degree of damage to the roof. But again, we have had structural information in sort of suggesting it's sound. This is the building, predominantly steel framed and metal clad. It's proposed to be demolished as part of this application. So this building has limited merit in terms of scale and character, so there's no objection by officers to its loss. And this is the single storey Barn 2 with the lean-to, and the area to the right of the slide is where it's proposed to have a glazed link to connect Barn 1 and 2. Given the blockwork finish, the elevation is proposed to be wood clad to enhance the character and make sure there's a more appropriate finish. And this is where the proposed carport is shown, so it's sort of partially undercover already on the edge of one of the barns. So in terms of key issues, in principle, the application seeks to convert two existing outbuildings on a complex that's had a number of consents for conversions. It's in quite close proximity to a listed building, but given the scale and alterations and character shown, there's no objection from officers. In terms of impact on wider character, the buildings currently exist. The bit that's considered to appear a little bit out of kilter is proposed to be demolished as part of this application. So officers are quite satisfied with the proposal. And given the material choices, we're not raising any objection in terms of impact on the farmhouse. In respect of ecology, because that was a reason for refusal last time, there was a preliminary roost assessment undertaken which identified the need for further emergent surveys. These have been undertaken and conditions now recommended, and as a result of the conditions, there's no objection from county ecology. The site also falls outside of any catchment area, so there's no need for any phosphate mitigation in this case. And in terms of highways, given the former use of the site and given the proposed use of the building as a 3-bedroom dwelling, there's no objection raised by officers in terms of highway safety or traffic generation. So it's being recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're joined by a speaker, hopefully online. Barry James, if you'd like to turn on your camera and enable your microphone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you just speak to us again? It was breaking up a little bit. I just want to make sure we can hear you clearly.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me.
Terrific. Yeah, we've got you perfectly well. Thank you now. So again, I'll let you know when there's 1 minute left of the 3 to go. So please start when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this application this morning. Now, as the officer outlined, the applications to convert these buildings separately have been considered by the committee, and we took the feedback from that meeting that we needed to review them, and we've come up with a scheme which is now for a single dwelling instead of 2. As the officer report notes, we've got these other permissions on the site. We're not trying to introduce a use which is at odds with what the future of this site is going to be. We're trying to deliver the best scheme we can for these redundant buildings in a sympathetic and appropriate manner so that it accords with your policy. We've come back with a scheme where there has been some very good dialogue with the officers in terms of the detail, the design, the materials, to get to a point where we're getting the best planning result, hopefully. As the officer also mentioned, the building to the immediate north and to the east, just outside the application site, both are going to be demolished. So that again has a benefit to the setting of the listed farmhouse. I want to thank, on behalf of myself and the applicants, the case officer and the conservation officer for their helpful input throughout this process in getting us to this point. We're content with the conditions, members, and hopefully the committee will endorse the professional recommendations. So thank you, Chairman.
Much. And to some extent, speaking for myself, I mean, it feels like this is what the process should be about. I mean, we had an application come before us before, which felt unacceptable by committee. Applicant and our officers have worked obviously hard to come forward with now something that brings a recommendation for permission and deals with the issues as well. I mean, I noticed there's a condition in there relating to the bat boxes, nest boxes and other things to deal with the ecological issues as well. So it does feel like this has certainly moved in the right direction. Members, any comments or questions, please? Councillor Bolt, first off.
As you've said, Chairman, this seems to be the best way forward. That's going to tidy up the site. Bearing in mind, as I say, we've got listed building status on something on the site. It will make it a lot better. I realise the objection from Cannington that's outside of the area, but you know, it's been developed between the owners and tested, and they've come back, as you've said, with something which is acceptable. I've got no problem recommending this.
Thank you very much. Anyone? Councillor Hendry?
Thank you, Chair. I remember this when it came the last time. I don't really know why it was, well, okay, the parish council went against it. Okay. I have no problem with this at all whatsoever, and I'm happy to second Councillor Bolt without any shadow of a doubt and no reservations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other comments or questions from members. In which case then we have a recommendation to grant permission, both proposed and seconded. All those in support, please show. That's clearly carried unanimously, so that is permission granted. And again, thanks to, I think, to our officer team and to the applicant and agent for showing that we can work these things through and come up with a much better solution to what was originally in front of us. So thank you very much. Right, members, that brings us to our next application, which you turn back in your pages to 82 and Bridgewater. And Mr. Evans. Yeah, we've got the cover sheet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to an existing warehouse building located in the town centre of Bridgewater. This site is just off of Blake's Road, although the address is given as 4 to 6 at Mary Street. The site itself is situated between two buildings. So we have the Blake Fish and Chip Shop onto St Mary Street here, and we have the Blake Museum located on directly opposite the site. The site itself is also flanked by an existing 3-storey residential block here, which also has parking and access to its side. So in terms of location and context, this is the town centre. We've got the Blake Street car park here and the River Parrot just on the right-hand side there. So the application is to change the use of the existing warehouse building into 4 residential units. Each of the units will be 2 stories in height. This follows initial application for 6, which had 3 on the ground and 3 on the first floor. Unfortunately, during that scheme, we felt that the outlook for the ground floor flat particularly would be a little bit problematic. They wouldn't have much. So the applicant has gone away and come back with a scheme which provides accommodation in the form of 2 stories, which would allow main living areas to be located at the first floor level, providing a decent amount of amenity for each of the units. So the outline in red is the indication of the footprint of the buildings to be converted. So these are the existing floor plans and elevations. So it's an L-shaped footprint with the existing pedestrian access onto Blake Street located here. This will be retained to provide a ground floor accommodation with access and also a bin store located directly off of Blake Street. There will be a central corridor linking the flats with staircases both externally within the shared hallways and also internally within the flats themselves to provide access to the first floor levels. So this is the ground floor layout. So we have 1 flat here, 1 flat here, 1 flat here, and we have 1 flat here. There's a degree of flexibility with the accommodation. Some show home offices and workspaces on the ground floor, with the first floor located here. So we have kitchen, open plan living, dining areas there, kitchen, living there, and again, open space is here and bedrooms here. So each of the properties will provide either 2 or 3 bedrooms, all of which will be served by either existing or new windows, which would supplement the existing windows located on the south and east elevations. And these will provide light and outlook to the main living areas of each of the properties. There's no proposals to extend the building itself. While concerns have been raised by the Town Council, the accommodation proposed can be accommodated within the confines of the existing building, and each of the units will be up to space standards. Actually, they would be in excess of space standards in this case, as each of the flats would be provided with adequate internal space for the accommodation. So I'll take you through some of the slides. So this is the view from Blake Street of the gable end of the property. This is where the proposed bin store and primary pedestrian access would go into the building. This would be retained in terms of the design, in terms of the opening and the windows above and to the side. So there'll be no change in terms of the street scene, no impact on the conservation area due to the setback position of the building here, which is the east elevation. So this is the residential flat here. We go in. So as you can see, the parameters of the site are quite tight, and there was concern previously when there was living accommodation and the flats were going to be restricted to the ground floor only. With this new layout, with the two-storey accommodation, it's considered the windows at first floor level will provide adequate light and outlook from the units within. So the left-hand side here is the existing residential block, which has staircases and secondary accommodation on the back facing this building. Again, the proposed accommodation will be served by new windows as well as the existing to be retained, all of which will be in keeping with the character of the existing building. This is a view of the east elevation and the north elevation of the L-shaped footprint, just for more visual impact. And again, here we have the car parking spaces which are attributed to the existing residential unit. There is a concern raised within the course of the application about the lack of parking. The site itself is very, very close to the town centre. In fact, it is in the town centre of Bridgewater, therefore is within walking distance of services such as supermarkets, healthcare, education, employment and public transport. So it's considered within this scheme that the site itself does lend itself to a development which the occupants would not necessarily require the ownership of a car. The site itself is also within proximity of an existing public car park. But there are restrictions within Blake Street, so you have double yellow lines, which would restrict any impact upon the potential for on-street parking in that area. So there wouldn't necessarily be a detrimental impact to highway safety in that respect. This is a view taken from St Mary Street. So as you can see, the site itself is just beyond this wall here, but it gives you an idea of how well tucked away the site is and the lack of impact it will have on the surrounding area in terms of visual impact and impact on the conservation area. So in summary, the application site itself is considered to be in a sustainable location. The development that we have before us today is a resubmission of a scheme which has reduced the number of properties within the flats to facilitate a better outlook and amenity value for each of the units. There would be no impact on the conservation area as a result of the conversion, which would be sensitive to the character of the building itself. And there would be a lack of significant impact on the amenity of nearby properties, given the existing uses surrounding the site. While there is no parking, it is considered that the site is primed for a town centre location with a reduced emphasis on parking, and that all aspects of day-to-day living could be accessed via either public transport or on foot. So in terms of the application itself, the recommendation is to grant consent. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kingham, you indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was just waiting for the right photograph to come up. Dirty Brook borders one side of this building. I remember years ago they were trying to put a walkway down that side. But are there any provisions for flooding from Dirty Brook if the occasion happened?
The application was subject to a flood risk assessment and a revised flood risk assessment as a result of comments received by the Environment Agency. Condition 3 of the recommendation would require the development to be carried out in accordance with the flood resilience measures that were outlined within that flood risk assessment. So there would be adequate protection for the building and the occupants from any sources of flooding within the area and further afield.
Any other comments or questions from members? Yes, Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. This is a story we hear about a lot where we have development in the middle of town where there'll be no cars. We all know that's absurd. That will never happen. There's likely to be 6 new cars there at least. This is in the middle of a residence parking zone, which means that they will automatically be able to get residence parking permits as new residents. So nice income for the new council, but displacement for people that currently use the residents' parking slots in the area. I realise that that is not necessarily a reason for turning down the application. I'm just saying it's a real weakness in the process around the centre of town. And again, the argument that people can rely on public transport. What public transport?
Okay. Mr. Evans?
Yes, so in terms of the site itself, it's quite right. There are parking restrictions in place with, I believe, on-street parking located along here, which is restricted to permit holders or certain time periods, I believe an hour. But the application site itself is directly to the south of the existing car park here, which is publicly accessible. And further afield within the town centre, if you do want to go further afield along the River Parrot, you also have access to the Northgate car park, which is a little bit more out of range, but nonetheless is still within walking distance of the site. So yes, I take the point that there is a degree of choice that the potential occupants would have in terms of coming to the site with a car, but it is considered that the number of restrictions within the area in terms of preventing people parking on the street would certainly certainly put off people from actually assuming that they could come with a car if they were to choose to live here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm all for actually conversion of properties within a town scene, because it does give a sort of affordable housing or renting for people, I guess. And they wouldn't necessarily need a car because they've got all the provisions as outlined in the report. One thing I would be a little concerned about, and I'm not sure whether it's actually our remit, is that, you know, in the case of fire, is there adequate sort of fire provisions or escape provisions?
Okay.
I mean, that would certainly be covered by building regs, not something that we would necessarily be able to control. So they would have to go through that process should planning permission be granted to ensure that they've got adequate provision for fire safety and escape.
Okay. Councillor Kingham.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's good to see these old buildings coming back into use to more of practical use again, and I have no problems in recommending this.
Thank you.
Grant application.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, you seconding. Thank you. I'm not seeing any further comments or questions, so we've had the recommendation to move permission be granted, proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Could you just double check that? Okay, and those against, please show. And any abstentions? So that is, yeah. So we're 10 in favour, no against, and 1 abstention. So permission is granted. Thank you very much. That takes us then to page 101. We move to Chapel Allerton. Okay. Yeah. And Ms. Chorley, I think you're introducing this one.
Thank you, Chairman. So here we have an application for the change of use of agricultural building for the storage and maintenance of agricultural vehicles and machinery. The application is retrospective. It is an enforcement generated application. There is an amendment required to the wording of the published condition 2 to read that it's agricultural vehicles and not cars. So it should read the storage and maintenance use hereby approved shall be limited to the storage and maintenance of agricultural vehicles rather than cars, and machinery solely within the private use of the occupier of the dwelling, currently known as Twinings Farm, and not for any commercial purpose whatsoever. So just in terms of location, the application is sat just outside of the village of Stoneallerton, just so members can see that one there. And this is a close-up version of that location plan. And the building we're talking about is this one right to the rear of the site. So it's utilising this existing access, and this is the dwelling that the buildings were associated with. So it's shown again on the location plan. So the access running up there to this agricultural building at the rear. There is existing landscaping along the boundary to the side. It is set quite far back from the road, so it's quite limited views in, although there is a public right of way that runs up along this side here and along the northeast of the site. And this is the building in plan form as it is. The development that's referred to is the partial infilling of the elevations with concrete panels to the lower levels. And some photos of the site just to share with you. So this is looking up of the access track that there is. This is the first building that you can see from the highway, a second building and the third building that forms the application site. And this is another shot of it, just in a little bit more detail. And a couple of images. This is looking at the rear of the site. The public right of way that I mentioned runs up along this side here. And this is the extent of the remainder of the agricultural land.
That we're looking at.
I'm on the wrong one. So apologies. So there's a public right of way that just runs up along this boundary here. Hopefully you can see that. And so we're looking at the rear elevation here and the side elevation. And this shot at the bottom just shows the remainder of the agricultural land there that's shown in the blue outline. So this is just showing the side elevation down there. And this one looking into the front. There is one piece of machinery there at the time of the visit as well in one of the previous photos. I don't know if you could see that. There is a caravan parked in there. The applicant has been made aware that that wouldn't be covered by this permission. That would need to be removed. So the application site is located within the countryside. The proposal seeks consent for the partial infilling of the elevations with the concrete panels that I mentioned, and for the continued use of the barn for the storage and maintenance of agricultural vehicles and machinery. The use is to be limited by way of condition to prevent any commercial activity, and the permission is required because the building is not part of an established agricultural enterprise. The applicants currently occupy the dwelling in breach of the agricultural occupancy condition. That's been confirmed by way of a certificate of lawful existing use. The condition does still bite in the future, but for the remainder of their occupation, it's not covered. And the applicants are not employed primarily in agriculture. The agent has confirmed that the use is limited to agricultural vehicles and machinery, and the maintenance takes place as a hobby activity. And they're happy with the condition to limit it to agricultural vehicles only. Subject to the above, together with that condition, the principle of the use is not considered to be unacceptable. The partial infilling of the elevations is relatively typical of what we would see for modern agricultural buildings, and is not considered to give rise to an unacceptable visual impact. Environmental Health have confirmed that only one complaint has been received about the site, and that didn't relate to activities proposed as part of this proposal. It was an unrelated complaint, and it wasn't taken any further. They've confirmed they've got no other comments with regards to the proposal. Conditions limiting the use would be considered sufficient to overcome amenity impacts. The development will use the existing access that was shown in the photos and on the location plan, and given its restriction for the use by the occupiers of Twinings Farm only and not for any commercial activity, it's not considered that would give rise to an unacceptable impacts in terms of increased traffic generation or highway safety. The nearest public right-of-way does mean that there are some public vantage points into the site that we looked at from the southeast and the northeast boundaries, although neither actually cross the application site itself. So subject to the restrictive condition and the revised description of development, it's not considered that the proposed development would result in an unacceptable impact, and my office recommendation is for approval on that basis.
Councillor Betty.
Thank you, Chairman. I may have missed it. I note from Stoneallerton's Parish Council comments that there was a hedge marked on the plan, and they say that this is for screening, but this hedge has been removed. Is this correct?
Julie?
Thank you. So this is the hedgerow that runs along the side of the site at the moment. There's nothing to show that anything within the application site has been removed. I'll just see if I can get the photographs showing the side. So there's the low level hedge here. It's not shown very clearly actually in the photographs, that runs up along the site. The public right of way is on the other side, where that kind of, you see just the green area there. In the agricultural field. The hedgerow hasn't been removed as I understand it. It's still there. You can see it on the site. I'll see if the photo there is slightly clearer. You can just see it along there. It doesn't form part of the application. There's no need to do any works to it. If they did do works to that hedgerow, it's not protected in any particular way.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions then from members? If not, I'm looking for a recommendation. Councillor Hendry.
Absolutely fine. No problem with this whatsoever. Happy to recommend grant permission. Thank you.
And just to confirm, that's with the amended wording of
Yeah,
the
of
conditions
course.
for the
Of course.
occupancy.
Yeah.
Okay. And amended description. Okay. You're happy with that, Councillor Hendry? Okay. Is that seconded? Councillor Kingham? All those in favour of that, then please show. Unanimous? That is clearly carried unanimously, so permission with the amended wording and amended description is granted. Right, members, that brings us to the end of the applications we have. So if you could turn in your reports to, sorry, in your papers to the reports under section 7.1. And we'll welcome back Mrs. De Vries.
Have you got the page number of the first?
143.
Lovely.
143.
Spending the day sharing the wrong screen. Right. So page 143, planning appeals received. We've got a prior approval, which is conversion of an agricultural building to a dwelling that we've refused permission for. It's currently subject to appeal. And land to the northwest of White House Lane, Loxton, Axbridge. That one hasn't been registered with a procedure yet, so we're assuming it's written reps. Okay, 7.2 appeals decided. We've refused planning permission and it's been dismissed at land at Heel House Farm, Brent Road, Burnham-on-Sea. That was a written reps and delegated decision, so wouldn't have been before members previously. There was also a refused appeal for erection of a log cabin for holiday use. That was also at White House Lane, Loxton, Axbridge. That was quite a good decision in terms of the need for a robust business case for a new enterprise coming up.
So if we move then to 7.3.
This is section 106 agreed, so planning permission issued. A fairly controversial one before members was the Cricketer Farm. Section 73, it's now had everything finalised with it and it's been issued planning permission.
Okay, again, no questions or comments on that one, so we move to 7.4.
And it's certificate of lawfulness for existing uses. We have refused planning permission for a lawful development certificate for use of a detached garage as a residential annex at Appletree Cottage.
And again, I've got no comments or questions on that one, so thank you very much. That brings us to the end of then this morning's agenda, so we'll restart again this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Thank you all very much. Right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Can I welcome you to the Sedgemoor District Council Development Committee? I'm Councillor Filmer, I'm chairman of the committee. Just a few housekeeping notes before we start for those of you who are in the room. There's no planned fire drill that I've been warned about this afternoon, so if alarms go off, then they are real. Your exits are through the doors with the where they're indicated. Toilet facilities are available at the back of the hall through the central doors, and if you would like to have a drink, there is water and jugs and glasses on the side of the room. Could I ask anyone who's in the room, if they've got a mobile phone, could you please make sure it's either turned off or turned to silent, please, just so it doesn't interfere with the PA or the meeting itself. Just so you know who's in front of you this afternoon, to my right are officers from our legal section and our democratic services. To my left are officers from our development management section and inward investment. And on the wings of the table are members who will be debating and ultimately deciding the applications before us. The meeting today, again, is being held as a hybrid meeting, that the members who are present in the room can take part in the debate and decision making in the canal side, but we're also joined by councillors and members of the public virtually through the Teams system, so that they can see what transpires at today's meetings. But it is only, as I say, members who are present in the room who can vote on the applications before us. For those at the moment, we will be joined online, and again, it's just a reminder to members of the public, if you can keep your microphones and your cameras turned off until we get to a point, if you're registered to speak, we'll ask you to enable those. And for everyone, this meeting is being recorded so that it can be watched back later if you should so choose. The format of the meeting is as per the agenda that's been published. A copy of the officer presentations for those who are joining us online are also available through the council's web pages. We'll take each application in turn. The officers will outline the application details and the background. There'll then be public speaking time for those who've registered to speak, and then we'll move to the members to debate and, as they ultimately decide the application. During that debate, there will be a proposer who will move a resolution that will then be seconded, and members will vote on that resolution. Once that has taken place, we will then announce the result of that decision. So if we move to the agenda itself, please, and we get to apologies for absence. And Mr. Taylor, have you got any apologies? And do we have a microphone just so that you can be heard? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Apologies from councillors Graham Granter, Kathy Pearce, Liz Scott, Liz Perry and Bill Revens.
Thank you very much.
And Councillor Tony Haywood.
Thank you very much. I think all other members are present. Next item on the agenda is urgent business. I'm not aware of any urgent business that isn't covered by our agenda. Item 4 is public speaking time for members of the public. For those of you who registered to speak, we'll, as I mentioned earlier, take each application in turn. You'll hear the introduction from the officers. I'll then ask you either to come forward if you're in the room to the speakers table, or to turn on your camera and microphone if you're joining us online. In either case, you're limited to 3 minutes to address the committee. For those of you in the room, you'll see we have a clock at the front. It will count the time down so you can see how much time you've got left to go. For those joining us online, they can't see the clock in enough detail to see that. So what I will do is I will interrupt you when there's 1 minute of your time left to go, so that you can then start winding your comments up within the time. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members this afternoon? I'm not seeing any, so that's fine. Thank you very much. Item 6 then is the item of the planning applications themselves. So the first of those where we have a speaker present is on page 116. That's the application in North Petherton, and I think Mr. Evans, you're introducing this one, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to a storage building located within the centre of North Petherton. The application site is located here and is an existing single-storey storage building formed of brick and tiles, and is at the junction of Clare Street and Queen Street. The outline in red shows the application site. So the proposal is to convert the building from the existing storage use to a one-bedroom dwelling. The accommodation will be across 2 stories, with the bedroom located at first floor level and living accommodation below. The existing property is located on the plans here. So we have, for intents and purposes, it is a single-story structure, but it has windows at an elevated level on both sides of the property. So this is the proposed floor layout. As you can see, the site itself abuts the junction of Clare Street and Queen Street, and would have a small area of curtilage to the east of the building for bin storage. These are the proposed plans for the dwelling. So the existing high-level windows would be retained. The garage door double opening to the north elevation would be replaced by windows with cladding below. There would be a monopitch canopy to the east elevation, providing shelter over the proposed entrance door. And this is also where the recycling and bin storage would be located. So this is the area of curtilage that would be associated with the property. Inside, we'd have an open plan living, kitchen and dining room with utility and bike store located just off of there, with a bedroom located above and a study room here, all accessed via an internal staircase. There will be some solar panels erected on the roof as well as part of the proposal. So if we run through the slides themselves. So the application site is in North Petherton, where the principle of residential development is considered to be acceptable in principle. The settlement itself and the location that it specifically is surrounded by existing residential properties. As you can see, the site is the site itself is occupying majority of the actual curtilage of the site, and the building will be abutting the existing highway. The concern we have with regards to the proposal, notwithstanding the principle being acceptable for residential use, is the fact that the application site is allocated very little in the way of residential curtilage or indeed off-road parking. The photographs here will show you the existing situation in terms of the concerns with regards to on-street parking that is within the vicinity of the site. So this is the north elevation looking back towards the junction of Queen Street and Clare Street, either side of the building. As you can see, there's quite a premium for space in terms of the highway as it is now. So this is the east elevation where the proposed entrance door will be located here. And just behind the overgrowth here, you can just about make out the outline of the window that will be retained for the bedroom and study at the first floor level. The brickwork and tiles materials that are predominantly used on the building will be retained. There are no concerns over the proposed design of the conversion. It's just the fact that the use itself would result in the need for a parking space. So again, as you can see, the area around the building is fairly tight. There's not a lot of space to acquire any additional curtilage. Any land outside of the site is not within the applicant's control. So unfortunately, we'd not be able to extend further south towards another part of the into another area to allocate more space for a parking space potentially. So we're looking at this application as a proposal for a dwelling with no parking. Within North Petherton, there are certain facilities that are provided. Unfortunately, it's not to the extent that we would consider there to be a substantial case to be made that this could be a parking-free development whereby someone would openly buy the property without parking provision being part and parcel of the residential use. The site itself is surrounded by Queen Street and Clare Street, which does not have any on-road restrictions in terms of parking. So at the moment, as you can see, those photographs that you've just seen were taken on a weekday afternoon. This is taken on a weekend in the morning. And as you can see, there are quite a few cars currently parked within the area, which make the existing highway already narrow, even narrower still. As a result, it's not considered that there would be sufficient grounds with which to accept a car-free development or parking-free development in this location, based on the current need and pressure placed on the highway for parking spaces. To encourage a further parking-free development within this area would result in undue pressure on that existing streets, which are at the moment are quite narrow and do not allow excessive maneuverability within the highway to allow turning and negotiation via the existing parking spaces that are attributed to the existing properties. So in terms of the concerns raised, this would be a situation where there would be no parking attributed to the future occupants of the dwelling, and therefore would likely encourage the parking provisions on the highway and placing undue pressure on a situation which is already quite congested at the moment. In terms of the design of the extension, if I go, the conversion, if I go back to the slides, there is one window located on the southeast elevation here. Again, as a result of the lack of curtilage attributed to the property, this would overlook third-party land, which unfortunately could result in undue overlooking or potentially loss of light to the main living sitting area here, which again just underlines the fact that the site itself is quite cramped within the situation it finds itself between Queen Street and Clare Street. So in summary, unfortunately, while the provision of a residential conversion within this building is considered in principle to be acceptable based upon its appearance and location, unfortunately, the lack of curtilage does hamper its ability to be successfully converted, with the resultant need for parking and the protection of the amenity of the property's occupants. The existing commercial storage use of the building, while not necessarily wholly compatible with the surrounding area, would potentially be something to be investigated, although it is considered that a residential use could be considered acceptable given the predominant use within the area. However, without the parking, it is considered that the development itself is not compliant with policy and therefore is recommended to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you'll see, we have a speaker on this application. Fraser Hawke, would you like to come forward to the table, please? Good afternoon again. Welcome to the committee. You'll see the 3 minutes on the clock. Start when you're ready. The microphone will enable itself anyway, so just speak when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Fraser Hawke. My wife and I are the proposers. It seems, as Mr. Evans outlined, that the crux of this matter, in the eyes of the planning department, is the absence of a parking space. I believe their guidance states a parking-free development would generally not be acceptable outside of town centre areas of Bridgwater and Burnham-on-Sea, where the majority of services and facilities would be within walking distance. As outlined in our main statement, the location of the Pound House is within walking distance of all required services and facilities equal to those of Bridgwater and Burnham-on-Sea. I hopped on a coach in the centre of North Petherton this year because I cannot fly, and via London travelled to the French Alps and back. To my mind, the word generally inherently implies the words but not necessarily or not always. So were this application approved, the department would not, strictly speaking, be in breach of guidelines, nor would it create an unwelcome precedent, as this is a conversion, not new build or added infill. In our submission package, there is a letter dated 7/11/22 from our architect, Mr. Keswick, to the planning department, in which he outlines the conformity of this proposal to the local plan. In the light of this and the reality of our current energy and climate crisis, it must be critical that the aim of local development should be sustainability and low impact, which this proposal will deliver, as well as affordability, for the benefit of the local community and future generations. Hence, I believe North Petherton Town Council are right in supporting this proposal, and I hope you will as well. And by the way, in 37 years, the only time I've never not been able to park on Queen Street or Clare Street was, I think, 1989, when I came home late from work on Carnival night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any comments or questions, please? Yeah, we'll start with Councillor Grimes and then Councillor Bolt and then Councillor Kingham.
Thank you, Chairman. In this case, I tend to agree with the applicant. I think all services are walkable. I think the area does need tidy up. It looks a bit of an eyesore at the moment, although I have to say it's not ideal. But I think we need to be consistent as to parking. I mean, you've only got to look at the application that we looked at this morning. So I'll wait to hear what other councillors say on this, but sounds quite positive at the moment, although not ideal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt.
I'm of the same mind. I'm going to use the terms that were used: Bridgewater Town, Burnham Town, and North Petherton's a town of its own. It's got all the facilities. Knowing where this location is, they're all very, very walkable, including the bus stops when they're running. I find it very difficult to differentiate between this morning's application and this application, which are it's probably got better facilities around it than this morning's application.
I think, no, I'll go and let the officers do their bit. So, Mr. Evans, do you want to go?
Yeah. So in terms of we did have a very similar proposal in terms of the fact that it had no parking. I guess the main difference is how much emphasis we place on the size of the settlement that we're dealing with. Bridgewater obviously is the principal town of Sedgemoor. It's the largest settlement we have, primarily where we focus all of our employment, education, retail, other services that you may need on a daily basis. While North Petherton, do not disagree that it doesn't have facilities along, sort of lines like those. Certainly not to the extent that Bridgewater has, though. That's the main issue that we have with this. I mean, North Petherton is classified as a Tier 1 settlement in the local plan, whereas Bridgewater is the principal town in Burnham on Sea, and Highbridge is obviously the other town as well. So it's certainly an approach we're taking with regards to feeling that the earlier application we had today, there was enough within walking distance of there to facilitate a more relaxed approach to parking. It's certainly not a situation that we feel that we could do with North Petherton in the same way, based purely on the size of the location and the access to similar levels of employment or retail or entertainment facilities that someone may want to use on a daily basis. In terms of the location as well, I mean, we're obviously not just talking about the parking, but also the joint party land that, at the moment in terms of character, it looks fairly commercial, obviously of a smaller scale, but there is that issue of the window being on the boundary and the lack of curtilage to provide that buffer between the uses adjacent to the property and this. If I go back to the slide on the screen here, so we have a situation where we have this land outside of the residential curtilage of the property, which is directly adjacent to a ground floor window here. So we do have two issues with the proposal as it stands at the moment. The lack of curtilage it provides us with no parking, but also issues over whether this window here and the occupants within would be sufficiently protected from any activities that take place within this area here. And like I said, this building adjacent is, it appears to be that it could be operating with sort of, more commercial characteristics than a residential domestic curtilage would normally expect, particularly one where the occupants of this property here would have no control over what goes on in here. So there is concerns over that as well. But yeah, I take the point about the parking. Although we have been said, it has been said that generally we would not consider this to be a car-free development. I have to say that was as part of a pre-application response that was provided to the applicant prior to the application coming in. So that's not the wording that's in the policies or the advised by the county council. So maybe that was an error on my part too, but it does seem to be that the generally element of my advice was taken a little bit out of context, really. But anyway, I will just say that in terms of the comparisons between the two applications we have now and the one we had this morning, it's just felt that the location itself does not necessarily allow us to wholesale remove a need for parking in terms of the daily needs of those potential occupants.
With regards to the window, that could be conditioned in some way, surely.
Yeah,
because you actually used the terms that trying to remember your actual wording, that it was to do with overlooking that area. Well, if it's an opaque window, it's exactly the same as a lot of our stuff where if they're overlooking a garden, which is I think what you referred to, overlooking another property, then we end up with opaque glass in it.
Mrs. DeBreeze, I think you wanted to comment.
I'm stealing my own mic. It was only that the issue, Liam, if you can just go back to the block plan again, please. So the red outline for the site is conversion of the building. So effectively, the extent of the planning application is the footprint of the building, with the exception of a small triangle at the front, which is where the porch into the is proposed to go. At the moment, that area is fully parked up with cars, but in the event you'd have a porch and a doorway going into and out of the property, you would hope people wouldn't park immediately in front of it. The window, if you can just put your cursor where the window is. So the window at the moment looks over that area, which is currently grass, but it's in association with the building to the back. If you can just hover over that, which looks to be in some sort of relatively low key at the moment, but commercial use. So the concern overall was that the red outline for the site was probably not sufficient to enable an appropriate level of amenity for the future occupiers. If the red outline were extended to include that garden area, then you've got security over that window on the side in terms of ensuring an appropriate area of amenity. And then it would just be sort of question mark over a sound or noise insulation potentially issue between that and the commercial building next door. But given the constraints of the red outline, we can't secure an appropriate amenity space for that unit. So the risk is you don't have any control over what's outside of that window. So we could control putting a fixed obscure glazed window in that would at least ensure that there'd be no direct overlooking. But it's a pretty poor amenity value for the future occupier if you're obscure glazing and fixing shut the windows that they're relying on for natural light. So the concern overall was the constraint of the red outline for this site did mean that there's no parking provided, there's no real private amenity space, external space provided, and there's potential conflict in terms of adjoining land ownership. But, you know, appreciate the parking issue is comparable to the Bridgewater example members have seen, but Bridgewater and I think Burnham-on-Sea were the two examples of areas where you would consider it because it is quite close to other public car parks, whereas I don't know where the nearest public car park would be for this one, whether it's near the library, but some distance. And, you know, again, there's no real pavement area in this area as well, so stepping out onto the highway from the entrance was just sort of a summary of officers' concerns, really.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kingham.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, you've got highways both sides. One side is two ways, one is a single lane. Very little outside space, but I'm looking at this in more of a terraced house. If that was a terrace with just one single front, you would park outside the front of your house. There's no reason in this case why you couldn't do that. There's no yellow lines or anything there. And I know it's not a planning thing, but we don't grant permission for it to be converted. It just stays there and becomes ruined. So it's better to do something with it than nothing. So I don't have a problem with the application.
Thank you. I must admit, from my own point of view, I completely understand where the officers are coming from on this. In terms of the two issues they've raised, I have slightly different view, only in the sense that this is a tier 1 settlement, where North Petherton is somewhere where we have been guiding quite a lot of development because it has facilities in that area of availability. And so I think I'm not too worried on the parking front for two reasons. One, because of that, and also because this is a redundant storage and workshop, which if it were to come back into use, one would assume there would be some parking required with the workshop as well anyway. So the parking bit I'm not so worried about. I do understand the concerns over the lack of amenity, and I would prefer it, to be honest, if there was amenity with it. But if we're redeveloping town centre sites, we can't control what is in front of us in terms of that. And we've seen other sites which come forward of redundant buildings where there are less than perfect terms of amenity. The applicant will have to make up their mind whether they are happy with that as their amenity, and any future occupiers equally would have that choice of is that something they're prepared to take as acceptable. I don't think it's so unacceptable that it wouldn't be workable, whilst it might not be perfect. So my own view at the moment would be I'm minded to go with permission, but I'm still yet to be finally convinced. So I will wait and hear the rest of the debate. I don't know whether anyone wants to come back before I go to Councillor Hendry and Councillor Betty. But if not, okay. Councillor Hendry and then Councillor Betty. So Councillor Hendry.
John, thank you, Chairman. With all due respect to the case officer, I think he's actually been a tad harsh here. The building is in situ already. It's not as if they're asking to put one there. It's actually ripe for conversion, to be honest with you, the looks of it. Now, the only small details everybody's arguing about is a window, which was quite rightly pointed out, could be obscure glass. If the applicant wants that, that's up to them. That's not a decision for us to say, no, you can't have it because you're going to be looking at obscure glass. That's up to the applicant if he's happy with that. However, the speaker, the applicant, I believe, made a point that sticks with me here. He said, and I've no reason to doubt, that in 37 years, the only time he's came there in 37 years and found there was no parking was on Carnival night. Now, whether that's correct or not, I can't verify, but that's what the gentleman said. So that being the case, if that was the case, and if they've only got the one car, I don't know if it 1, 2, 3, I have no idea, but if they've only got one car, then according to the speaker, to the applicant, parking's not a problem. Hasn't been all the years he's been there. The building's already in situ, it's already there, could be converted. Even worst case scenario, it was not converted. If the chap took a bed in there and a television, he could sleep in there anyway. Not applying for it to be a converted house, but he could just sleep in it and get on with it. So at this moment in time, I think the actual recommendation is a little bit harsh. And on the basis of the applicant saying about the parking, I actually don't have much of a problem with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Betty.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to echo what the fellow councillors have said. I mean, there is parking. I believe the parking for this is probably the same distance as it was on the one in Bridgewater. It's only across the road to Tesco's, where there's parking, and the same, or down at the village hall. So if they wasn't room there, they could park in the at least in the community centre car park, which doesn't have limited parking times, but I believe the Tesco ones might have limited. I can't see a problem with this. It will turn this building more presentable. It is a bit of an eyesore when you go around there, starting to look a bit derelict, but I believe with this it will enhance the street scene.
Thank you. Any further comments from members? Any comments from officers before I come to look for a recommendation? Mr. Hallett.
Thank you. Just to say, obviously, in terms of the officer recommendation, it is also based on the fact that objections have been received in terms of existing on-street parking issues as well. So just to give the balance to what Councillor Hendry's saying and the applicant's saying, there have been issues raised by the residents consulted on the application about the lack of parking. I mean, it is a policy issue. Tier 1 North Peverton still requires parking to be provided. 1.5 spaces, I think, is the parking standard. That won't be met by this application. Members need to weigh that into the balance, obviously, as part of their consideration as to whether or not that causes an issue. I think we just need to be a little bit careful about drawing comparison. I know it's easy to draw comparisons when we've got an application in the morning from it, going the other way.
But ultimately, you know, the policy position is slightly different given the level of facilities that the site will, as the town has. It is tier 1, not a principal town like Bridgewater or Burnham-on-Sea. There will be some parking. Of course, there's parking around at the community centre, as you say, and at Tesco's, although I think Tesco's is related to Tesco's only. But I think you need to draw into your thinking the fact there have been objections about the existing parking issues within that immediate vicinity raised by the objections, and I wouldn't want that to get missed as part of your consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Bolt.
Yeah. Just very quickly with regards to, sorry, I'm trying to read something at the same time. Was somebody else to speak?
And not that I saw.
Yeah, because I was going back on what the chairman has said, is the fact that we've had quite substantial building going on there because North Petherton does have the facilities to support it. I find it hard to hear that it now doesn't have the facilities as Bridgewater does to support a dwelling in the town centre. I just make the obvious point that those developments have met the parking standards as set out. So I suppose that's the issue. This is no parking development, which is the issue.
Councillor Hendry.
Okay, Chairman, once again, I've heard what everybody else said and what I said myself, and I fully understand this thing about the parking tier 1. I understand all of that, but I have to go back to what the applicant said about the only time in 37 years or so there's no parking as a carnival night. Now, I've got no reason to doubt the chap. If that's what he says, then so be it. On the back of that, I propose a recommendation to grant permission. I'm sure nobody else will agree and I'll be shouted down here, but that's my proposal because I actually think it's okay. I don't think parking is such a problem as been spoke about, and that's where we are. Thank you.
Again, without trying to put words in Councillor Hendry's mouth, in terms of the parking issues, I guess it would be that if we were to go down this route, it would be that the committee don't feel there would be an impact on the highway safety and issues relating to parking, partly because there is an alternative use. It's an existing building with a potential existing use which would generate parking need in its own right. So there is an offset. It's not as if it's a new build which is creating something additional. And could that address the issue in terms of understanding why there's the view that we're taking in terms of parking? Okay, I'm getting a couple of nods, so that's okay. Do we need to address the second point in terms of impact on amenity, or just that the committee has taken the view that they feel that is okay? Okay. Is it Debreeze?
I would just, if we're looking at amenity, the one question I would ask is that if members are minded to support it, would that be subject to sort of a noise assessment in terms of ensuring appropriate living standards for any sort of future occupier, given the commercial use that's attached to the back of this building? You know, noise or disruption may be a bit of an issue. So whether members wanted to secure that via a condition if they were going that way.
I mean, I guess it's difficult to put a condition on for something that might be an issue, but if members take the view to grant permission, I guess they're saying that they don't believe there is that issue at this point, and ultimately it sits with the applicant and any subsequent owners to make their own assessment as to whether they believe it's an impact on their living, in which case don't go there. So, Councillor Hendry, are you happy then that you're moving recommendation to grant permission, subject, obviously, as we would normally do with an overturn like this, to suitable conditions in terms of materials and plans and everything else that we'll need to sign off with chairman and vice chairman to make sure that we don't miss
one
any.
More small condition, because of the neighbouring property that probably spoke about the window, just to say that they have to put in obscure glass because of the neighbouring property. They're entitled to their privacy as well. That's, I don't know, is that a worthwhile condition or not?
I mean, I guess we could. It's just whether we're saying the issue I think we were raising was it was the impact on the residents of this property from the neighbouring property rather than the other way around.
Yes, because the plans that are submitted, hopefully that there now. This is the window in question here, which is the one that's at ground floor level that serves the proposed sitting room, kitchen and dining area. So obscurely glazing that would obviously prevent any users of the adjoining site to view directly into that area. It should also be noted that the area at the ground floor level is also served by windows here and here, which open out onto the public highway. So there would be a degree of privacy and in an outlook from that area within the building. It's just this window here because it's right on the boundary with the adjoining land, which is not in the control of future occupants. Obscurely glazing that may eliminate any cause of overlooking and impact on privacy. So if that forms part of the condition, we can do that.
Over to you, Councillor Hendry. Is that something you wish to?
Well, if you're asking for my opinion, I'd rather go with obscure glass if that's a condition. If nobody else likes that, then so be it. But I personally would say yes.
Okay. So the recommendation there has been moved, including suitable conditions to be agreed, one of which would be obscure glazing in that particular downstairs window. Councillor Kingham?
Yeah, I'd second that, Chairman.
Okay. Is there any further questions or comments from members? No, in which case we have the recommendation to grant permission subject to suitable conditions to be agreed, including, as I say, the obscure glazing of that downstairs. And we've explained the reasons behind it, which I think we've got minuted, so that's fine. All those in favour of that recommendation, please show. No. Was that 8? And any against, please show. And that's all members voted. So that's 8 in support, 1 against, and no abstentions. So that is permission granted. Thank you. Right, members, that takes us to the application with the next speakers present, which is page 122. And I think it's Ms. Chorley who's joining me for this one. And we're moving to the parish of Wedmore.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for the approval of reserved matters for the erection of a dwelling at the Hill in Mill Lane, Wedmore. Update for members today. An objection has been received from County Councillor Harry Munt. The details are there on screen, but just further to the committee report, they've been advised via email that that they would like to object, or they would like to echo the objections received from the parish council and residents regarding contradictions of policies D2 and D9 relating to design.
This is the development.
Okay, so just to remind members, the outline application did come before committee previously. This is a reserved matters application. It's this site here shown by the red circle. Permission was granted on the basis for one single self-built dwelling, that it was rounding off this existing linear cluster. And this is the application site in slightly more detail. So the public right of way that runs just to the west of the site and then runs along the boundary of these properties here. And we can see the location plan in more detail. So the application site is limited to this red outline, and the extent of the land owned by the applicant is shown edged in blue. And here we have the proposed site plan. So we've got the dwelling shown here, which is the roof lines broken up by this area here. So it would appear almost as a broken 2 ridges. Got the public right of way that I mentioned previously, which you can see with the red dashed line, runs along the west of the site and then to the rear of the properties neighbouring the site. This is the indicative plan that was provided at outline, again, just to kind of share with members what we were kind of given at that point. Obviously, it was indicative only, but just in terms of size and scale and the kind of layout that we were looking at previously. And here we have a street scene provided by the agents showing the new proposed dwelling as it would be seen from Mill Lane. So from Mill Lane, it's designed so it has the appearance of a single-storey dwelling. This is the nearest neighbouring property shown here. And here you've got the 2 floors. So whilst it has the appearance of a single-storey dwelling when viewed from Mill Lane, it is a 2-storey dwelling, which will be clearer from the elevation drawings that I'll show you in a moment. And this is just the roof plan again that I mentioned previously. So you've got the 2 kind of main areas. The site is accessed via a small pedestrian bridge from Mill Lane, giving access to the kind of upper floor and parking area over to the east of the site. Okay, so this is the elevation that will face Mill Lane. So you've got what, as I said, appears to be single-storey building accessed via the pedestrian bridge. This shows the side elevation that will be seen from the public right-of-way just to the west of the site. So the access is here via that pedestrian bridge that I've mentioned. And this is the rear elevation. So you can see the property in its entirety from that northeast elevation there. And this is the other elevation that you would see from the other side where it opens onto open agricultural land. So just some site photos. This is an image taken from the public right-of-way looking north along the western boundary of the site. So the application site is just kind of up to the east here. And that's showing it in a little bit more detail. So this is the public right-of-way that runs from this field gate here down, and this is the neighbouring property. This is looking from that boundary over towards the neighbouring property. And this is the site itself. So that field gate that we mentioned is here. This is the established head road that bounds the front of the site. And there's proposed additional landscaping, so a hedgerow to plant along this boundary and the rear boundary as well. And then just a couple more photos to give a bit more context in terms of street scene and what it's near. And again, these are similarly just some more photos to show the kind of different directions of the development that the dwelling will be seen within. So this is looking back along Mill Lane. So again, looking up from the public right-of-way runs along here. These photos are taken just slightly further down, looking towards the application site. So this one here. And then in the other direction towards the existing built form. And these are taking further back along Mill Lane. So just at the very start of that linear cluster that we mentioned it rounding off. So this is the dwelling at the far end. And here are some photos I'll show you in just a moment that are taken to try and get the long views. That some comments have been received regarding the kind of long views into the site. So this is the application site here. So we're looking at something that will be seen within the kind of existing built form, but there are some photos just to give you an indication of what that will look like. So looking up from Wells Road, you can obviously see the existing cluster, large extended dwelling at one side of Mill Lane, the far side as it stands at the moment. Again, just taken from Wells Road, looking up, slightly more direct view towards where the application site will be. You could almost just see the very top of the ridge line of the neighbouring dwelling opposite. So in terms of planning policy and the principle of development, the principle of the erection of a single dwelling house on the application site has been established through the granting of the outline consent. With the exception of access, all matters were reserved, and so it's at this point that we can assess the detail of the proposal before us. The site has been sold since outline permission was granted. That permission was conditional, so this application still needs to comply with the requirements of self-build policy in terms of meeting the self-build tests and the applicant or occupier having a local connection. In this case, the occupier has been confirmed to be the applicant's daughter. The agent has confirmed that they have been fully involved in the design process, including the revisions to the design. Policy D9 does require proposals to be of a high quality design and complement the existing built form of the settlement. Policy CO2 requires that proposals are to be in accordance with policy D19 and respect the qualities of local landscape and be sympathetic to the character and visual quality. So they're the key issues really for today. So size, scale of design, as I just mentioned, is a key area of concern here in terms of the objections that have been received. The proposal has been revised since it was originally submitted. So the red outline that you can see on that image there shows the extent of the dwelling that we first had in. Officer concerns were raised that as it was originally proposed, the dwelling was of a size, scale and massing that would have been too great for the character of the area. and concerns were raised with the agent, who has sought to adapt and revise the design to address those issues. So again, you can just see here the original outline with a separate garage building, and then the red outline there, the red dashed line, shows that the new building was going to be closer to the neighbouring property, closer to the existing public right-of-way, and just of a greater kind of scale overall. So just to confirm, we've got a small reduction in the ridge height, a reduction in the overall built form, and it's also been pulled closer to Mill Lane, so that kind of external area here has been reduced. Concern has also been raised with regards to the amenity impact that the development is going to give rise to a loss of views. It's noted that neighbours opposite will have a loss of view that they currently enjoy, but that in itself isn't a reason for refusal. Policy D25 does set out the proposals that could give rise to an unacceptable amenity impact, and either neighbouring occupiers or potential future occupiers wouldn't be supported. But here we're looking at issues such as loss of light, privacy, overlooking, pollution impacts. In this case, it's not considered that the development proposed would give rise to unacceptable impact in that regard, whilst the separation distance from the neighbouring property is approximately 16.5 metres. So there's still quite a substantial distance between the two. In terms of views from public vantage points, as I mentioned, there are public rights of way that run along the site. So there will be views of the development there. There was, and it's mentioned in the officer's report, a suggestion in the design and access statement that the public right of way that's here would be narrowed. The agent has confirmed that that doesn't form part of this application. It was referred to as a possibility. The public right of way does sit outside of the red line of the application site, and obviously any future request for amendments to that public right of way would be subject to its own controls and process. In terms of highways and parking, the access was agreed at outline. The proposed development will see 4 parking spaces. Standing advice sets out an optimum level of 3.5 spaces plus visitor parking, so we're happy that that's sufficient. Landscaping is proposed that will be a 1.2 metre high post and rail stock-proof fence with a landscape hedgerow planted around the rear and the west of the site. And a condition is suggested as part of the proposal to secure a detailed landscaping plan to ensure that there is an appropriate degree of screening of the site and that we secure the biodiversity enhancements we'd want to see. In terms of wider ecological issues, enhancement and mitigation was secured at outline. Concerns regarding the potential and presence of badgers was raised, and a pre-commencement condition that was applied at outline stage that would be applicable to any proposal moving forward. So in summary, the principle of development is acceptable subject to conditions. The proposal complies with the requirements of the outline that has been granted and would still be controlled by all of the conditions that were attached to that original permission. The decision is regarding the detail of the proposal today, and it is not considered that the design and detail put forward is such that would warrant refusal. Conditions can be applied and are suggested to secure landscaping and materials to ensure the development is appropriately screened and is of a high quality finish. It's also suggested that permitted development rights are removed to retain a degree of control, and noting the size and scale of the dwelling already proposed. Subject to those conditions, my recommendation is for approval.
Thank you very much. As you'll see, we've got a couple of speakers who registered to speak on this one. So if we could start with Cheryl Morris, if you'd like to come forward to the table. Good afternoon again. Just as mentioned before, you'll see the time on the clock start when you're ready, and the microphone should turn on when you start. That's fine.
Good afternoon, everybody. I represent the objectors. The existing adjacent properties are single structure 3-bedroom bungalows lying along the top of this elevated ridge with space for 2 cars. Facing northeast across the valley, they might have a conservatory and or 4 or 5 windows at most. In contrast, the proposed dwelling, seen from the northeast, has 2 stories, 2 linked structures, 4 glass double doors, 8 additional windows and parking for 4 cars. It also has 14 rooms, including 5 toilets and extends down the slope, thereby cutting into the hill rather than continuing the existing line. It does not neatly round off the existing cluster as it is larger, higher, more visible, and extends into the hillside further than anything already there. How can a building on this scale be considered appropriate to the size of or complementing the existing, or enhancing the landscape as required in D2 or D9? A few miles northeast, in front and parallel to the plot, lies the main road and tourist route from Cheddar to Wells, where are grown the famous Cheddar strawberries. From here, the plot is directly in front of the fruit and veg outlets, picnic areas and playing fields, and it's right on the eye line. A house of this scale and fenestration, extending downwards, cutting into the hillside, will be visible upon the landscape as it rises above Cheddar Valley. The sun can reflect back from glass at this elevated level, creating flashlights in the surrounding area, as is already the case with the neighbouring property. The Mendips and AONB are again directly opposite the plot, only a few miles away. Many come for the footpaths and enjoy the view across the valley, which is broken by this ridge. The scale and intrusion into the field below could render such a construction conspicuous and out of character with its surroundings, not just in the locality, but on the landscape thousands come especially to see. Supporting photos submitted, you have not shown. The appearance of the development, viewed anywhere from the north and northeast, is therefore critical. The two footpaths meet at the entrance gate in Mill Lane, which also currently offers some amenity to wheelchair users, less able, who can't walk the paths, and visitors to the town, who rest and admire the Mendips and the valley from this viewing point. It's an important identity of these paths. If the northwest garden boundary could be moved a metre or two to the right, it would still afford some amenity and enjoyment to the public and less able, without affecting the applicant. Otherwise, the proposed boundary with trees planted in the corners will impede any remaining view. And if the viewing point is lost, the public amenity is lost, and the reason for coming here is lost, even if the path itself is unaltered. Thus, the applicants will be claiming all of a valued public amenity, contrary to D2.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our second speaker, I think, is joining us online. So Isabel Beacom, if you could just turn on your microphone so that we can make sure that we can hear you.
Good afternoon.
Yep, that's fine. So if, again, just remind you, you've got 3 minutes, and because you can't obviously see the clock, I will interrupt you when there's a minute of that time left to go. So please start when you're ready.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and councillors, I am Isabel Beacom, Chair of Wedmore Parish Council Planning Committee. The Parish Council has unanimously voted to object to this application. The application has also had 14 objections from parishioners and concerned ramblers. The application does not meet the criteria of policy D9 of the local plan, self-build and custom homes. I quote from Reserve Matters: "The applicant must be the future occupier of the unit. Mr. Cullen resides at West End Farm, Wedmore, and is only the developer of this site. We also object to the scale and nature of the development. It's not appropriate in size, accessibility, character, and identity of the existing community. This 4-bedroom, double height, glass fronted house is at complete odds with the 3-bedroom bungalows along Mill Lane. The proposed outline plan was a modest bungalow and is now completely changed in appearance, scale, and landscaping. The council is concerned that the landscape will adversely affect it in contrary to E9 landscape Wed 5 design, particularly that of the proposed northeast and southeast elevations. The local landscape character will be adversely affected. The siting and landscape do not consider the visibility from public accessible points. It would be highly visible from the Cheddar and Wells Road, and at night it would become a double-storey light polluter. The public right-of-way is well-trodden path, which will now be overshadowed and dominated by the new development and will detract from the view both up and down on the path.
You have 1 minute to go.
It is contrary to policy D4 natural environment and policy D5 biodiversity and geodiversity. This development dominates the skyline, and from the right of way, it detracts from the enjoyment of the open countryside. It contradicts policy D20 pollution. Impacts of the development are likely to result in an adverse level of light pollution. The windows in the development have increased in size. The number of windows has increased from 23 to 27. This can only have an adverse effect to wildlife. During the day, it will provide a constant glare and reflection, and at night, the light pollution will be seen as far as the Mendip Hills. We also object that the development is at odds with policy D1.
I'm going to have to call time on you there, but thank you very much. Thank you. Members, any comments or questions, please? Yeah, Councillor Kingham.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This particular site on Wednesday, it's on the ridge of the hill. No matter what you build there, you're going to be able to see it.
Probably a bit nearer, Stuart.
Comes in where you, it's on the ridge, and no matter where you are, coming into Wedmore, you will see. You can see all the properties along that top. The applicant has one way they've reduced the height by dropping it down into the ground. So from Mill Lane, it is only a single story. They've got adequate parking, and let me say the design is sort of well suited, I would have thought, for Wedmore. And at the moment, I don't have a problem.
Thank you. Could I ask one question, which was the issue was raised about the extra windows and the potential of light pollution. Were there any, I think in the reserve, the outline, there were some conditions relating to the windows in terms of impact on lighting?
Yeah, that's correct. There is a condition, sorry, so it's condition number 4 attached to the original outline application that states that prior to the first occupation, a lighting design needs to be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority, and that looks at external lighting, but also glazing as well, so how anti-glare glazing would need to be included and things like that. So there is certainly an awareness of that, and we are seeking to control that through condition.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from members, please?
With the project electric, they're not going to have too many lights on.
Absolutely. Are there no further comments or questions? In which case, I'm going to be looking for a recommendation if there are none to.
I'd like to move a recommendation, Chair.
So that was just to check. That was sorry. You're moving the recommendation.
Move the recommendation,
okay.
Yes.
Councillor Hendry and.
I'm quite happy to second that. I think it's a fantastic property, to be honest. Thank you.
Councillor Glassford, did you want to add anything or? Okay. I'm not seeing any of the other hands raised, so we have a recommendation moved and seconded, which is to grant permission. All those in favour of that, please show. Eight. And those against? So 8 in support, 1 against, and that takes it to all the members. Is that correct? So that, okay, thank you very much. So that is clearly carried. So permission is granted. Thank you. Members, if you can move to the next application again, where we have a speaker present, and that's page 133. And we remain within Wedmore. And Ms. Chorley.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for the erection of a replacement livestock building and a bat roosting shelter. Again, this is a revised scheme that we've got through. The application site is off Wells Road in Latcham. So the application site, just to give you some context, this is the edge of Wedmore here, and this is the application site that we're looking just to the north of Wells Road in Latcham. The location plan, so we've got Wells Road here. This is the existing access between these two buildings. comes down into the site, and this is the proposed replacement building. There is an existing concrete yard here, designated traditional orchard, and then there are a number of residential properties just to the south. So there is an existing, albeit now derelict, farm building. That was a traditional building, and as you can see here, it was of a lesser footprint. And this is the replacement building, so it is wider and is slightly higher as well. Okay, so the replacement building is a modern steel portal frame agricultural building, as is quite common now, and this is the bat roosting shelter that's proposed. So it's a freestanding shelter that is going to now be proposed just here adjoining the new hedgerow that will help screen the development. So just some site photos. So this is a photo showing the existing building. So as you can see, it is in quite a poor state now. You can see the kind of a little bit of the remnants of the elevation and where the tiles would have been on the roof. And the concrete yard here. So the building's just to the side of the photo. Got the traditional orchard you can see in the residential dwellings behind it. The photo here to the left of the screen is just looking from the site back up the access towards Wells Road. And just a couple more photos within the concrete yard, just at the point of the access, the orchard that's there and the dwellings behind. Again, just to give a little bit of context in terms of the area that we're in. So in terms of planning policy and the principle of development, the application site is located in the countryside. The site comprises a yard and a derelict building within a land parcel of just over 30 acres in total. The applicant advises that the site has been used for overwintering calves and is used as a satellite facility to a much larger farming enterprise. They advise that a larger building is needed to meet the requirements of modern day farming practices and to allow for machinery to enter as is needed. The application does follow a previously refused application for a much larger building that sought to cover the concrete yard almost in its entirety. The building now proposed has a footprint of approximately 274 square metres, a height of 4.5 metres to eaves and 5.75 metres to ridge. Whilst the balance is that whilst we're seeking to appropriately control development in the countryside, policy CO1 does recognise there are circumstances when development is justified and necessary, and the principle of farming is obviously a countryside activity and is recognised as part of the rural economy. So it's a balance of meeting the agricultural needs of the holding and the impact of the proposal. So the size and scale and the nature of the development that we're looking at, that needs to be justified. There has been some local interest in repair and rebuilding the existing traditional building as opposed to a replacement. And whilst that's noted, it's not within our remit to insist upon that. The applicants advised that the building no longer would have met the needs of the enterprise due to its low height and smaller scale. The design that's put forward is typical of a modern agricultural building. It's commonplace in the countryside now, and they do form part of the wider rural landscape that we see. In terms of design, they are more functional in their nature, but the proposal that we have does have a low eaves height and overall a low ridge height. New hedgerow planting will help to screen the views, and there is intervening orchard and the yard that will remain. The stock increase is not the intention, but the applicant advises that to meet modern welfare standards, a greater space is needed in the building. Given that this is an existing use of the livestock building, the separation distance that will remain is not considered to be unacceptable. The separation distance will remain approximately 50 metres to the rear of the nearest dwelling, bringing the development 3.9 metres closer than what the older building did. This isn't considered to give rise to an unacceptable impact. In terms of ecological impact on the public right-of-way, a bat box is proposed as part of the application. Whilst no objections were received to the original proposed siting, the public rights-of-way team did advise that a diversion of the footpath may be required to facilitate that development. This led to a resiting, which then caused concerns to ecology. So we've got a third proposed siting, which is now before members, and that will see it closer to the new hedgerow to overcome all of the concerns. A condition would be applied to prevent external lighting and to secure the hedgerow planting and the revised location of the bat box. An informative would also be applied regarding the public right-of-way. The development will utilise the existing access from the highway. Concerns have been raised regarding impact during the construction phase particularly and on an ongoing basis. However, there isn't capacity for improvement of the access, and given the level of development and the permitted existing use, it's not considered likely that this would give rise to a significant greater number of vehicle movements. There's been no objection received on highways grounds. So in summary, the principle of development is considered acceptable. The size, scale and the design is justified and is not considered to be inappropriate or to give rise to any significant adverse impacts over and above the existing. The amendment to the plan reference is necessary regarding the siting of the back box. So in one of the conditions, the drawing number would need to be inserted. But subject to that amendment, my recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions.
Thank you very much. Again, you'll see we have a speaker who is joining us online. Andy Reason, if you could turn on your microphone and then just give us a sound check.
Hello.
Can you try again? It was a little bit quiet. Try again.
All right. Hello. How's that?
That's much better. Thank you very much. So again, reminding you, you've got 3 minutes and I will let you know when you've got a minute of that time left to go. So start when you're ready, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, councillors and guests. I'm representing local residents with respect to this proposal. The local residents look slightly down upon this site, which the pictures don't really show. The other thing that's missing from the photos that you've seen is photos of the barn prior to the storm damage, the neglect and subsequent removal of the roof. The main objection really is the size and scale of the new building. It was said that it is slightly larger. It is 50% taller than the existing and 66% larger by way of floor space than the existing structure. This is considerably larger. The proposal also states that it does not set out to increase the numbers of livestock housed at the site and refers to 100 calves. Contrary to this, over the past 20 years or so that I've lived here, there have never been 50 calves on this site. If that number was to rise to 100, that would be a significant increase in the movement of vehicles to and from the site, carrying food in, carrying waste out, carrying the cattle in and out, an increase in noise and odour from the actual cattle themselves, and a potential for increased in pollution and vermin. The main farm and associated buildings are not directly accessed for this site, meaning all traffic movements will be via the relatively narrow access track and the main road, carrying mud and the like onto that main road. The main farm has undergone considerable growth over the past years. These have included the erection of livestock agricultural buildings and thus provides for a working area without having to conduct excessive vehicle and cattle movements along what is a B road, but is a fairly busy B road. It's right that the proposed structure is a modern industrial style, but it has zero character, replacing what was once an historic style structure with significant character. I would, if possible, like you to have a look at the photos of what was there previously and what is there now, because they are vastly different.
1 minute to go.
That's all I have to say. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members, comments or questions, please. Councillor Hendry.
I often wonder why things like this actually get to come. I've said this many times before, even before the planning committee. I understand the parish council objects, I've got all that, but agricultural buildings have to be allowed to be diverse too and change in shape and size over the years. This is no exception. That's the way it is. And had I been on the town council for this, that application wouldn't be before you today. I just do not understand why it ever gets this far. I've got no problem with this whatsoever, and I've got no questions to ask about it either. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just ask a question in terms of the livestock numbers, we've had it raised as to whether this is an increase in numbers. Do we have any information that you could just let us have?
So apologies, yes. So in the officer's report, so they've confirmed that it's needed to provide improved welfare standards to meet the number of calves that have previously been kept at the site, which is approximately 100. They advise that this particular satellite site is particularly well suited to the rearing of dairy young stock, so they can be reared in isolation, and that's what they want to continue to do.
Thank you. Councillor Betty.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm fully in support of this application. I believe that cattle numbers do go up and down throughout the year, so I don't see a problem if there was only 50 there, but then in the winter there might be 150. They do fluctuate with prices when they sell and buy, so I'd happily move the officer's recommendation for this, please.
Thank you. Any other further comments, questions, or Councillor Kingham and then Councillor Hendry?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. If this is a satellite farm, whereabouts is the main farm? How far away?
So my understanding is that there's two elements to it. So the main farm, there's one at Easton, and I don't have the distances. They're both nearby. We did look in the previous application at whether or not it could be resited there, but that wasn't an option, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the recommendation, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hendry, do you want to add anything? Okay. Last chance for anyone else to comment if they wish to. Yes. Just to confirm, for the proposer and seconder, Councillors Betty and Kingham, you're happy with that, is with the amended condition as outlined in terms of having the updated plan for the bat box, it was, wasn't it? Yes. Okay. Members, those in favour of granting permission with that amended condition, please show. That would appear to be unanimous, so that is clearly carried, so thank you very much. Members, if you could turn then in your papers to page 108 on your screens. And we move to Cossington. And Mr. Titchener, would you like to introduce this one, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we are at a site known as Land to the East of Station Road in Cossington. It's a variation of condition application. So the original permission from 2019 was the erection of a dwelling house with garaging and access. This proposal seeks to amend some of the drawings that submitted as part of that to include the retention of earthworks with the use of gabion baskets, so effectively engineering works that have taken place as part of the build that weren't in the original proposals. The application is before members due to the objection of the parish council. So we're just on the very sort of northern fringes of the village of Cossington here. So this is the site here. So this is Station Road here. So permission was granted in 2020, though the application originally arrived in 2019 for a single dwelling on this part of the plot. So it is a sloping site, and that's particularly relevant to the engineering works that have taken place. So the fall is from sort of west to east, so the road is higher than the plot effectively, and then it slopes down down towards there's a little stream here. So this is sort of the valley effectively. This is just the location plan showing the red line of the site. There is existing residential development on the north, western and southern sides of the site. And then this is the house that was proposed and granted permission. And now, so what's sought now is a retention of gabion baskets, which have been erected in a line along the sort of eastern part of the site. So gabion baskets, for those who don't know, I expect most people will, but they're wire framed retaining structures filled with stone. So they've been positioned along sort of the eastern boundaries, sort of here. Permission is also sought for the retention of a small section of post and rail fencing, which is just along the back of the dwelling here. Immediately adjoining the house. So as a Section 73 variation of condition application, all we can look at is how this scheme varies from what was previously approved. So obviously the principle isn't up for reconsideration. It's just the gabions and the fence that we're looking at here. So the gabions, this plan's just it's a technical plan, but it just shows the gabions position in a bit more detail along this line. So they've been installed to the rear along sort of what is possibly one of the more steeply sloping parts of the site to the rear of the property. The land has sort of fall away quite sharply. So as I said, no such gabion baskets were shown on the originally approved scheme. And the applicant's justification for including them is that this is to prevent sort of landslip and soil erosion that would occur with the construction of the main house. the access road that comes in off of the road, and the lower parking area. So a significant cut of the existing bank is required to achieve the levels, they say, set out in the original scheme. They say that without these structures, they cannot achieve this natural gradient on the site due to the pressure that would be applied by the earth. And then these are just some photos of the proposal. So the top photo is sort of stood towards the access points, so sort of as you come in off the site, and the gabion baskets are all sort of located in behind. So rather than proposing to use retaining walls, which would have performed the same function, they've gone to use gabion baskets filled with stone. In their view, that was to be a more sympathetic option, as it would be free draining, and can be planted up over time to create more sort of green walls. So the lower photo shows the gabion baskets in a bit more detail. So you can see these are sort of supporting some of the earth here. It does provide a slightly more flatter platform immediately to the rear of the dwelling, which would have been much more steeply sloping. So the gabions are located at a much more lower level than the obtainable public vantage points. So the dwelling will obscure most of the works from the public vantage points on the public highway that runs along the west boundary of the site. So any greening effect that takes place, will soften what views are available. I mean, that will take some time to grow up. It will look a little bit stark where you can obtain a view at the moment, as you can see in this lower photo, but that will change over time. In our view, the works aren't such that they would be considered to give rise to unacceptable visual impacts when, say, stood on the public highway. Members of the public had raised concerns about the structural suitability of the works, but building control have inspected, they've been inspecting throughout the build process, and we specifically asked them if they were able to inspect the gabion baskets as part of this application. The officer came back, confirmed they've been laid and tied together as per the usual method, and they had no concerns with the method of construction. And again, just photographs just shown from the top end. Now, this fence here does not form part of the proposal. That was put up without permission and has since been taken down at our request. It was unfortunately within part of the visibility display, but at the time of my site visit, it was up. But I've been past since and it's come down. So just for the avoidance of doubt, the fence that we are seeking approval for, you can just about see in behind, which is this one that sort of runs along here, is at a much lower level. Building control requested that just because of the angle of the slope here. That's because it's at a much lower level. It's not within the visibility display. It's not something that we had any concerns about. So we don't really think there's any visual impact that arises as a part of that. So overall, we do consider that the proposals don't give rise to visual harm and therefore are in compliance with policy D2. The parish council and the neighbour on the northern side had raised concern about works giving rise to overlooking impacts. So effectively overlooking that may be arise from people stood within this area looking towards the garden to the north. And the works have undoubtedly resulted in some regrading of the land and some changes to the levels within the site. However, quite a bit of the changes along that sort of boundary were temporary in nature. There were piles of spoil at the time of my officer's site visit, sort of that they had been putting there, and I think that had probably exacerbated concerns of the neighbour about how much levels change were going to be taking place. And here you can see a photograph I took at my site visit showing the piles of spoil very close to the neighbour's boundary, sort of exacerbating those fears. However, that spoil has since been removed, and the levels along the boundary have been sort of returned to as they were, sort of mirroring the sort of land levels on the neighbouring side. Nonetheless, the original plans included permission for a 1.8 metre fence all the way down the boundary anyway. So I think any views in between the properties are going to be severely precluded by and privacy provided by the fence. The levels difference is going to be relatively negligible now. And I went past this morning just to confirm that that was still the case, and it still is. And just to add to that, the property to the north, the actual dwelling, the property to the north benefits from a very large garden. Their property is about 40 metres away from where this boundary is, so there is significant separation nonetheless. So we wouldn't consider that now that spoil has gone, that any unacceptable amenity impacts would arise. I just want to do one quick update. There's one of the conditions where I've given the wrong revision number. Jeff, you this. Oh, is it? I'm trying to think of which condition thing is it. Is it in here? Is it? It's page 1. There's the conditions that were there's 3 conditions that we were updating, and they refer to a site plan drawing 105 Rev E, but in one of the places I've referred to it as Rev D, I believe, in one of the 3 conditions. So that should be Rev E. So for the that would need to be amended before any decision is issued, but it's just in that one single condition, which is condition 3. Just in summary, we wouldn't consider that unacceptable visual or amenity impacts would arise, and therefore we are recommending permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from members? Start with Councillor Kingham.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I know through here quite well because it's quite a steep bank which goes right down into the stream that runs through the bottom. What is the actual height of the gabion baskets?
So they're a metre in height each.
It's just 1 metre.
They're just 1 metre, 1 metre each. They're just a 1 metre square block, effectively.
Yeah. So how many have they put in? How high?
Oh, they're just 1 high.
Just 1 height.
Yeah. That's my understanding. So just 1 high. That's what was perceived at the site. It's just the 1 high. Yeah.
Because they've already reduced the level for the build of the bungalow already. That's already been reduced, and then they just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no problem. I recommend granting permission.
So you're moving the recommendation with the amended condition as outlined.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I just also double check in terms of the gabion? From the pictures you showed us, it looks like there's quite a wooded area just beneath the gabion. So is there anywhere that there's that, because it's not a public open space, but is it all pretty much covered down there anyway that you're not going to see a great scar of grey stone?
From the land that's on the east side. I mean, the land that's on the east side isn't subject to any public rights of way, as I understand. There is a public rights of way network in the village, but on the west side of the site, which is where the residences are. So my understanding of public vantage points are that they would be limited, and they would be limited to roadside views. I think, like I said, I think the greening effect will take some time and will soften it. Even if there were views that were obtainable from the land to the east, the gabion baskets will be seen against the backdrop of the dwelling, and the dwelling was always going to be there. So they will just be a feature of, the sort of domestication of that site.
Okay. Any further comments, questions? Currently have a proposal, but Councillor Bolt.
Thank you. No, I'm going to second it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no further comments or questions, we have the proposal that's been moved and seconded with the amended condition as outlined. Those in favour of that, please show. That would appear to be unanimous. Yep, so that's clearly carried as well, so permission granted. Members, I think that brings us to the end of all the applications we have before us. Unless Mr. De Vries has anything else, I will thank you all very much, close the meeting, and hope you all have a happy Christmas if don't see you at full council tomorrow. Cheers.